And I thought that the talent you have is the talent you're born with, and that's all you've got, right? So if as good as you are in high school, that's probably the best you're ever going to be. And boy, that's dumb.
Welcome back to the Free Code Camp podcast. I'm Quincy Larson, teacher and founder of freeCodeCamp.org. Each week, we're bringing you insight from developers, founders, and ambitious people getting into tech. This week, we're joined by John Washam, who's both a developer and a founder. John is a software engineer at Amazon and creator of one of the most popular open source projects of all time, Coding Interview University. John, welcome to the Free Code Camp podcast.
Thank you, Quincy. I'm so glad to, I'm honored to be here. You're a leader in this space of learning to code, and it's just, I'm honored to be on. So thank you so much.
Yeah, well, I've learned so much from you over the years, just reading your blog, and of course, just going through the many resources through your open source projects. You've got a computer science flashcards project as well, which we can talk about in a little bit, and just learning how you assimilated this massive corpus of knowledge and went out there and went into the software engineer FAANG tier company interview process. Yeah well, people probably have heard of Coding Interview University, but for people who haven't, maybe you could talk just really quickly about what it is, and we'll go into your story about why you built it. But what is the resource itself, and what is the value proposition to people who are hoping to break into tech and work as software developers?
Yeah, so Coding Interview University is it's basically just a long list of resources broken up by topic, so that you can kind of guide yourself through a computer science education, and then learn how to interview so that you can get hired at the goal is kind of anywhere, right? To get hired anywhere, but a lot of folks are going for the big companies, and the resources there prepare you to have the knowledge and the information you need to get hired.
Yeah, absolutely. And you yourself, famously, this is maybe a spoiler alert for people that are excited about hearing John's entire developer origin story, which we will get into in a second, but it was originally called Google Interview University, and of course, that wasn't meant to be. But it sounds like something just as good or better came out of that, which is your long career at Amazon as a software engineer, both at Amazon and at Zappos, which is a pretty big e-commerce company that Amazon acquired maybe 10, 15 years ago. So very unique culture in itself, and a very inspiring founder who's no longer with us, but who is just really, really cool. If you've ever been out to the Las Vegas tech scene, it's basically built around Tony Hsieh and the Zappos, startup ecosystem that he helped create. Maybe you could talk just a little bit about, working at Amazon, working at Zappos, and is it everything you hoped it would be?
Yeah, it's great. So when I started at Amazon, it was I went into I'm sure we'll discuss more of this, but so I won't talk about how I got in there, but yeah, Amazon is a big company. It's real big, and I was on AWS config team. So it's one of the many services within AWS. And I was one member of that team. And I had never I knew a little Java, but I had never really written any unit tests to speak of, just a handful. And basically when I jumped into Amazon, I knew I was going to have a lot to learn, and I had a lot to learn. So so getting, working at Amazon and and working at their high standards as far as like the code reviews and like getting your designs signed off and like stuff like that. Um, yeah, it definitely leveled me up. And then working at Zappos has been really super. Like Zappos is great. And as you said, like Tony with another had basically invested in that company in the beginning and then turned into CEO. And the uh, the term workplace culture came from Zappos. Like it was a new thing back in the mid 2000s that was, or I guess the late almost 2010.
Yeah.
That like culture started to take over the conversation in startups of like hiring the right people that match what you're looking for in a team and with a company and people to grow with. And yeah, and Zappos is kind of crazy sometimes and fun a lot of times, but it's a super place to work, and
Yeah.
it's kind of a little bit of a refuge from the the crazy Amazon world.
Yeah, I can imagine. Yeah. I mean, I've heard just like how exacting the standards of Amazon are and like how focused they are. I mean, focus is really the word I'd use to describe what they do. Whereas if you might think of like Google as like less focused, for example, famously kind of like trying a lot of different things. Like Amazon strikes me as like incredibly like metric driven and just like really focused on the bottom line at the end of the day, which, delivering value to customers, I guess, is like customer obsessed culture and everything. And it sounds like Zappos has a little bit of a different culture, but I guess the reason I asked you this question right off the bat is, was it worth all the work that you put into learning computer science? For people who are like, should they continue their studies? Like, is it worth it to become a dev?
Yes, it's worth it. I mean, this wasn't my first rodeo. I had kind of taught myself web development back in the post bubble period of that ended in like 2000, the early .com days.
Yeah.
And so I had worked at a lot of places, but like trying to like teach myself computer science was like it's almost like getting a whole new job, right? Like it's almost like changing a career. So when I when I went into that world, it's like, yeah, it's different, it's big, it's also really good pay, and if you're at Amazon, you get stock options, and there was a big stock upswing at the time. So like financially, it was great. And as far as like getting my skills up and kind of opening me up to a different world of software development, definitely worth it. So I mean, and of course, once you get into like one of these big companies and you've got that on your resume, like you can kind of go anywhere.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's what I tell people, even though FAANG probably isn't going to be your first developer job. Mm-hmm. And when I say FAANG, I mean like really any big name brand tech company. It doesn't have to be specifically one of the FAANG companies, FAANG, which is Facebook, Apple, Amazon, Netflix, Google, right? Like those are the kind of the prestige companies when that was coined. And people like reconfigured exactly who, like Microsoft. Why isn't Microsoft on the list?
I know. I was just thinking that.
But I think that one thing that's really interesting about you is that you did like have kind of like good enough developer chops to be able to get things done for a long time, and then you knuckled down and you really like, I'm going to go to like next level. And so that is going to be the story we're telling. But I just want to reiterate to people straight from John's mouth. He said that it's worth it. Like it is worth going deeper on your skills and not merely, having kind of like a quote unquote lifestyle business type consultancy or project or something like that, but actually really tooling up and going and working alongside, I guess you could say like the most learned and capable like software engineers on earth in many cases, like working alongside them. I mean, assuming that they are in private industry and they aren't just like Caltech, like teaching or, working for NASA or something like that. But like the actual people that are in industry, you can work among them, right? If you spend the time and the energy to learn the fundamental skills, to learn the math, to learn the computer science. So What I want to do is like go way back, because you've had like this really interesting career that is this the first podcast you've ever been on?
Yeah.
So you've never gotten a chance to really tell your developer origin story, and we're going to do that here. I want to start from little John Washam. Just the little tyke, right?
Yeah.
The snot-nosed brat. What were you doing when, what were your aspirations as a kid, and like, where did you grow up? Maybe just walk us through kind of your life at whatever pace you feel, because this is fascinating to me. Like, this guy, just to reiterate, this guy chose to leave, startup life. He probably had a comfortable existence and everything, and like aspire to more, even if, there's this saying in like startup land, like if you have like a hill climbing algorithm, right, and you want to get to the highest point on the entire surface that you're on, right? Mm-hmm. Like a lot of times you'll get to the top of a hill and you'll think, oh, wow, I got to the top of the hill. I'm at the highest point. And then you look over and you see an even higher hill. And well, yeah, of course you want to get to the top of the hill, but what does that involve? That involves climbing down and then climbing all the way up another hill. And I mean, it sounds like from my perspective, that's what you've done, right? Like a lot of people would have just stopped where you were, and probably just figured out a way to make, consulting or having a smaller startup work. But you were willing to go work for somebody else, which takes a lot of humility after you've been independent, right? And to climb your way up like a giant hierarchy, right? I mean, it's an endeavor, I imagine, both psychologically and, of course, in terms of just raw work that you had to do to get where you are. So I'm going to shut up and back up and let you tell your developer origin story. But sure. I just want to like kind of grant it sufficient gravity for people that are listening. Like, this is not like an everyday ordinary thing that just anybody does. Like, it does take a certain amount of gumption and audacity and humility, frankly, to do this. So with that, John Washam's origin story.
Oh man, this better be good. Like honestly, when I was a kid, there were two things that kind of consumed, well, three. Like I drew a lot. Like I really liked drawing. I played with Legos a lot, and I played with my Star Wars toys almost constantly. Like I was a kid in the early '80s, like Star Wars was, and Empire Strikes Back and Return of the Jedi was all like in that prime, kid consumption years, and I wanted all of the toys. So, Star Wars was the only thing I really cared about. Like even when Raiders of the Lost Ark and all that came out, and Ghostbusters and all these like big, and Back to the Future, all these big movies from the early '80s came out. If it wasn't Star Wars, I didn't care. So like I didn't watch a lot of that stuff until years and years later. So Star Wars and like that whole thing really consumed me. But yeah, I liked drawing and I drew a lot, and like people are like, "Oh, you're so talented. You're gonna be an artist when you grow up." And like I even remember one career day I came in like a beret and this was elementary school, and like a smock, and like I had a little palette on my thumb, and like, yeah, I'm gonna be an artist someday. So yeah, that's crazy. And then like I think Lego is kind of like my first step into like building things.
Yeah.
But I think the kind of the thread that winds through my story is I like building things. I like creation of things, whether it's through drawing or through Legos or through computers or through startups. Like making things is what I really like to do.
Yeah.
So that was me as a kid.
Yeah, and maybe you could talk a little bit about like you start to grow up and you start to look around and you realize like, hey, I can't get paid probably to build Legos. Maybe there are like competitive Lego builders out there. I mean, probably just as rare,
right? The world
just as rare would be professional artists who actually like draw.
Yeah.
Or like there are lots of artists that work, in architecture. You could argue that a lot of the people building, software applications are artists or certainly artisans. But it, those aren't like skills to pay the bills, so to speak.
Yeah.
Was there a point where you realized like, hey, I've actually got to kind of pay my way through life? And was there any sort of temptation to go to art school, or like what were you thinking kind of coming of age, like high school age?
Yeah. So like in middle school, like I think the thing that really broke it out for me was um, my brother had a TRS-80 color computer that
Mm-hmm.
you hooked up to the TV and like you could write programs on it. Um, and I thought that was really cool. And like after the school, like I think he had gotten it and then done some stuff for the school year for like a computer class, and then it just kind of sat on the side. And I was like, "Hey, can I play with your computer?" And he's like, "Sure, go nuts." So I spent the entire summer with the little manual. I have a copy of it back here on my shelf
Yeah.
that I picked up later. But yeah, I just started going through that manual and like learning the commands, and I fell in love with this thing. And like that was the summer um, of like just living in this computer. Uh, and it's funny, I didn't even get through the whole book. I think I stopped at the chapter on arrays because I was like, I don't need that. Like I'm fine with just writing code and loops and functions. That works. I can get everything I need done with that. Um, and yeah, so, but there was something about it, like I could make things and like see things move and like see things happen. Uh, and it was like this little kind of perfect world where everything went just exactly as I wanted it to. And I think that kind of, and like it was like you could think of it like a Lego box with like a trillion Legos in it. And like you just build whatever you want. As long as you have enough memory, I guess, and hard disk
Yeah.
space. But
Which today, I mean, it's
yeah,
bountiful, but back then it was a serious limit. Like, I mean,
yeah.
TRS-80. Like, what year was this? Do you remember when your brother got his TRS-80?
This was 80. This was 85, and it was. I think it was 80. I was 84 or 85, and I know that like when the next school year rolled around, I took there was a computer like middle school computer course you could take, and I loved that. I didn't love the history part, like learning about all these old like engineers and Babbage and all Lovelace and all this stuff, but like but like okay, now we're gonna actually touch a computer. I was like, yes, let's go. And it was like a real computer with like a real processor, not a 16 kilobyte computer like I had at home.
Yeah.
And so that was a lot of fun. But I didn't own a real computer until a decade later. Like,
Yeah, in
so
the
I just
90s. Do you remember the first computer that you had? Like, what model it was?
yeah, it was so it was 95, and I delivered pizzas so I could, because I was in my 20s by this point. I delivered pizzas so I could pay off my because I had some debt, credit card debt and stuff. So it's like, okay, I'm gonna deliver pizzas, and basically worked two jobs. I worked at a department store, and then I delivered pizzas at night. I was like, I'm gonna pay off my debts, and then I'm gonna get a loan and buy a computer and like all the software that I want to get for it. And I remember the computer was $2,000, and it was a compact Presario, and I think it had like it was like a 700 megabyte hard drive and like uh, something like 8 megabytes of RAM or something.
Yeah.
It is so long ago, but to me it was like everything. But it's funny enough, I didn't really program on it. I just used software and played around with it. And
Yeah.
did flight simulator and stuff. So
Yeah.
uh,
And I'll just interject that, like, so many people, like myself included, like, I was very fortunate and privileged as a kid to have, we had an Amiga computer.
mhm.
And it was amazing. But really all I did with it was, just play video games. I would use it as a word processor. Like, I would create like my Mortal Kombat move cheat sheets, like all the different moves for Mortal Kombat, and then I'd print those out on my old dot matrix printer. I'd take them to the arcade and I'd sell them, and that was like my first business, was selling all the moves and fatalities to Mortal Kombat to other kids at the arcade. And but that was like what I used my computer for. I didn't use it for really anything creative. It was just consuming, right? And that's how most people use their phones today. They probably primarily use it to consume, watch Netflix or scroll through Reddit or something. Maybe they interact a little bit on social media, but yeah,
I will go back to, you did have a question earlier that I do want to answer on, and that was when when it came time to go to college, I wasn't too smart about it. Like I knew I liked computers, and I even looked through the computer courses at the school. This was LSU in Shreveport, so
Yeah, LSU,
uh,
Louisiana State University.
yeah. But this was not like this was just a satellite school. We didn't even have the same like mascot as like big LSU. We didn't even have a football team at our like we it was just a little satellite campus.
Yeah.
But when I when I would look through like the book of like okay, well what what courses like what do I want to major in? I did look at the computer courses, but for some reason I was like I'm gonna do economics because like I think I was just tired of being like a broke kid, and I was like I want to find out where the money goes, like make that money,
Yeah.
and that was dumb.
Most popular major in the United States, business.
Yeah,
20% of college students go study business, and I think it's because they think if they study business, they're going to be able to make money. But if you really
yeah,
want to make money, just study computer science, right?
heck yeah,
But anyway,
yeah,
you and me both. Like, I didn't really care that much about making money because I was just focused on I don't know. I was like one of those kind of Gen Xers who's like totally cool with like the bookshelf that was made out of like cinder blocks and like the creaky mattress that was on the floor, and I would just go to the library, and that was my life, like going to the library, getting books, going back, read. Like, you ever seen like Goodwill Hunting, where that's his hovel that he lives in? He just checks out books and he just stays there, and then he goes and works his day job. Of course, he worked construction, which I was not tough enough to do for very long. I worked at like Taco Bell and grocery stores and like retail, but so many people. So I studied liberal arts. Like everybody on listening to the podcast probably knows I studied English, which is not the field that you want to go into if you want to be able to like support a family in 2024. But it was very, I enjoyed it. Did you enjoy economics at all?
I thought it'd be cool and like give me a little status, I think, and like make me look smart, but there were some things about it. Like I would go to the library, and there was like this magazine. It was like a journal called Econometrica, and I would look through that and have like all these cool mathematical formulas of like and the like papers on the like stochastic variability of the such and such, and I'm like, oh, this is so cool, but like I didn't really have a passion for economics, and even during the time where I was at college and learning this, like I was teaching myself other things like on the side. Like I learned about electricity and circuits and stuff like that, and that also was like painting, so I was keeping up with like art stuff and like drawing and painting and stuff. And I even had a couple of my pieces, like I went to a coffee shop in Shreveport and I was like, hey, could you put up my artwork? And it was kind of like dark artwork, because I was like big into horror movies at the time.
Yeah.
So they ended up putting it in the
favorite 80s horror movie.
The Thing is amazing.
Yeah. Oh man, such a cool movie. If anybody hasn't seen it, you have to watch it on Halloween. You have to watch these at night. I'd say The Thing is up there. I mean, Alien is probably my favorite. Is that 79 or is that technically 80? But yeah, like that in The Blob, the Blob remake, I guess, 1980s.
That was cool.
My kids have heard about these, but they like I always joke, oh, let's watch The Blob. They're like, no, let's watch Alien. No. But so you were really into horror movies, like John Carpenter, of course, amazing visionary.
I mean that did pass, but like because
but your art was edgy.
Something. It was a little edgy, and like they did end up putting it up in the coffee shop, but like in the back room next to the bathroom. but hey,
you're on display.
But hey,
that's more than a lot of artists can say.
Yeah. But like I didn't go to art school because one, I thought like I saw that there was other people that could draw better than me, and I thought that the talent you have is the talent you're born with, and that's all you've got, right? So if as good as you are in high school, that's probably the best you're ever going to be, and boy, that's dumb. So I've learned a lot about like talent since then, but I also didn't want to draw things for other people. I didn't want them to tell me what to make. I wanted to make what I wanted to make. And so that was a big reason I didn't get into like go to art school and like get
Yeah.
into commercial art and stuff, is because I don't know. I thought that's just going to take the fun out of this. So
Yeah, I mean, I'm sure like a lot of art is commissioned. There's like some patron who's like, "Hey, can you do like this really cool painting of me with my dog or something like that?" I don't know. Like, I imagine that's a lot of like the typical artist like income comes from, not just pursuing their, I don't know if you ever saw the movie Art School Confidential. Yeah. What's his name? The John Malkovich character, and like he just draws triangles. And like that's his thing. He's like he settled into this. He found his lane, and he never deviates from that because that's what he's known for. And so he's trapped in this like drawing different like geometric shapes, even though it's like every piece looks the same and stuff. It's like what he's known for. It's kind of like a Rothko-esque thing. Like, did Rothko get trapped there? I mean, Picasso broke out, Dali broke out. They do all kinds of stuff, but that's like at the very tip top where you can basically do anything. Damien Hirst and stuff, right? But sorry. Art School Confidential. Great comic book turned into a pretty good movie, too, about art school and the absurdity of kind of the overlap between art and commerce as it pertains to fine art. I mean, like, again, as I've said, I believe artistry is present in all kinds of work that people do, but specifically creating art that's going to be displayed in a gallery, Ai Weiwei type stuff. You do want to, like, that's like its own kind of like, I guess fine art is what they call it, right? So you didn't want to do fine art. I mean, I want to drill deeper into that because I suspect, and I'm not like a psychologist, I'm not somebody who studied this extensively, but I am a person who runs, a training charity that helps people learn new skills. I suspect a lot of people have that misconception that, I'm not very good at programming. Like I see all these people who are way better at programming. They must have natural programming talent. But the reality is those people were probably just been programming a lot more. And a lot of people forget what it was like to suck at doing something because they started doing it when they were at a really young age. So they just think, I'm like just naturally good at it. Or they, it's like the anthropic or what's that thing? Like you don't know what you don't know. Like you kind of project upon yourself like these the limits of your own knowledge kind of limit your imagination, and it's hard to imagine that somebody could have tens of thousands of hours practice programming when they're only like 22 years old or something in college, and you see them in your class and you're like, holy cow, I can never be as good as this guy. But it's totally possible. Life is long, and people, if they monomaniacally focus on a single thing for a long time, they're naturally going to get good at it through practice, probably, right?
Like anything you do, whether it's like, and I'm big into like, I'm back into drawing and like digital painting now, so we can talk about that later. But like now that I have like a normal life, I can enjoy the things I used to enjoy. But like with anything, like learning a foreign language or learning a new skill like drawing or programming or anything, or even walking. Like nobody comes out of the womb walking, and nobody comes out of the womb like painting or programming computers. Like all of us start at zero, and some people have a talent, but I think a talent is I think talent when you're young is made up of a couple of things. One, it's you have a great interest in something, so you do it more, right? And then you just get better at it by doing it more. And then what's the other thing? But like, yeah, just like having a passion for something will make you want to do it more, and then you get better at it, and then people see that as talent. But it's like, no, like I spent, as a kid, I probably spent like 100 hours drawing like AT-ATs and other Star Wars things, and like just kind of got good at it.
AT-ATs are the big walking tanks that like. For people that aren't watching the video version of this, like most people just listen to the audio. But if you're watching the video version, you can see John's beautiful bookshelf behind him, which has like lights inside of it, and he's got like tons of Star Wars figurines and things like that in the background, along with like looks like a pretty broad collection of books. Oh wow, that's like a Boba Fett, it's a Stormtrooper, and it's an AT-AT.
Yeah.
So cool, man.
Thank you.
That's really cool that like now that you have the time and the energy and you've got some degree of work-life balance and you have like income and all these things taken care of, you can kind of like get back to your roots. And that's pretty awesome.
Thank you.
I'm sorry I didn't mean to interrupt your flow, but I just wanted to point out the AT-AT back there and make sure
Yeah.
make sure people knew that, like, yeah, this guy really is into Star Wars.
Yeah, I mean, this is all I have now, and this is stuff that was bought like within the last probably 10 years. Like all the stuff I had when I was a kid, I gave that away to another kid. And yeah, when I was in my 20s, and so yeah, I don't have any of that old stuff, but that's okay. It'd just be probably gathering dust anyway. But I got these guys.
Yeah.
Just
So-
something nice to look at.
So you're basically like the thrust of what you're saying is because people are passionate about something, they do it a lot, and because they do it a lot, they get good at it, and then it's a virtuous circle, a feedback loop. And so, like a world class filmmaker like George Lucas, for example, probably spent a great deal of time not being good at filmmaking before he was good at filmmaking, and then because he enjoyed it so much, and because he was getting better at it, he kept doing it more and more. A world class, I mean, that can be applied to anybody who's good at anything, I think, that positive feedback loop. And so I guess a question I have, not to interrupt your developer origin story, because we haven't even touched on, your foreign service, for example, like the Foreign Language Institute that the Department of State runs and stuff like that. We're going to talk about that for sure. But do you think that somebody can become good at programming if they don't really enjoy programming? Do you think somebody can kind of brute force and slog it and become good enough to work at like a FAANG company if they don't enjoy it?
I don't think so. You need something to drive you through the hard times and through the times where you doubt yourself. Like you need a motivation to get you through. And sometimes it's not programming that will give you that. Like maybe it's to give your family a better life, and that's enough. But I think having a good motivation and being interested in it, and being it's something that you would do even if somebody wasn't paying you to do it, like you just do it as a hobby just for the fun of it. I think that's what's really gonna get you there. Because yeah, if money is the only motivation, it's gonna be real hard unless you have a desperate situation or like an environment you're trying to get out of. That can be the motivation you need. Because we know, like, if people aren't desperate enough, they'll bulldoze through anything they have to. Luckily, I didn't have that. I wasn't in that situation, but I did have a passion for it, but I did have some motivation beyond just the love of the game as well. So
yeah. Well, so you're delivering pizzas. You're doing another job too. I can't remember what you said it was, and you're basically just like able to get a computer, using it mostly for entertainment and like the kind of stuff people did in the 90s when they had a computer. Like, I don't know about you, but I like downloaded like every song that I ever wanted to listen to. I'm like, yeah, I can download it off FTP. I'm a pirate.
Did you get that? Did you get that, Bruce? You got that? Okay.
Yeah.
Go.
You wouldn't steal a
Intercept.
car, but you would download like every Bjork song. So like stuff like that. Well, like, how do you go from there to going to Korea? Like, I do want to get to that. Like,
Yeah.
make a path to that.
Yeah. So I did have regret about doing the whole like economics thing, and I did have I'll be frank. I did have a path. I was like, okay, I'm gonna do this degree. I'm gonna like work in like a bank, and I'm gonna work in maybe finance. I didn't know the difference between finance and economics. I was dumb. Like I was 18, so but I did have a plan, and so I was like, to kind of like get up the ranks and like make some money, right? But I was working in a store at the time, and somebody came in and they like basically got me into like an MLM, and that derailed me for a good 2 years, right?
Yeah, and an MLM, multi-level marketing scheme, frankly, like something that should, in my opinion, be illegal in the United States, but for whatever reason, they're not illegal, probably because they make a lot of money. Some of which is paid to the government through taxes, some of which is paid through lobbying. I don't know how it works. I don't know how it's legal.
Yeah.
Can you describe that? Like,
yeah, there was lobbying in the I think the 70s by a large founder of one of these big MLMs and um, his kind of cronies in office, and that's how it became where this is not illegal. This is totally a legitimate business operation. But yeah, so basically any kind of business where it's kind of a two-part business. One, you're selling things, and mostly you're trying to sell them to people that you know, which is called social selling in today's parlance. And the other part is like recruiting other people to do the same. Like those are the two halves of an MLM. And there are people that, they say that there are people that make, big money and like all that, but the majority of the people don't make anything. Majority of people lose money. And the problem with, like, it would be great if everybody made money, then everybody be doing it and it would like take over the whole USA or the whole world. But
yeah, infinity money glitch.
Yeah, but money, and I'm very passionate about this because I just hate them so much.
Yeah.
And I was a person that was very ambitious, and I would have done any job like I needed to do to like make money. And so what they tell you is, oh, if you're ambitious enough and you're hardworking enough, like you'll make money. And I was ambitious and I was hardworking and I worked really hard. And I was like nights and weekends, like a startup, like working on this stuff. And yeah, I lost money. It's I think there are some people that like have the right combination of factors and they do make money, but it's such a tiny percentage. You might as well just buy a lottery ticket.
Well, my understanding is like virtually all of these, and like there's a channel called CoffeeZilla, which I've been on. CoffeeZilla, huge fan of his channel. If you're watching Coffee, keep doing what you're doing, exposing these terrible. I'm not going to call them businesses. These scams.
Yeah, it's a scam.
But one of the things that like I think he and like a lot of other people in the space of like basically revealing hucksters and stuff like that. If you're one of the first people to join, then you're, but like almost all the people that make money are just there early because it's like a pyramid scheme, essentially, right? It's a legal pyramid scheme.
Yes.
So anyway, I'm very sad to hear that 2 years of your life got derailed, that you lost money due to this while working very hard, while probably taxing a lot of your interpersonal relationships, because that's the insidious thing about this. It'd be one thing if you just like lost money and it was like, a casino type business model where you're at least having fun while you lose money or whatever. Like, not that I'm not a fan of gambling, and I've never gambled before, but I could see that like some people enjoy that, and we should probably have that be legal. Otherwise, we're just going to have a bunch of underground, gambling that's probably going to involve a lot of crime and stuff like that. At least it's legal this way. But if it were that, where there was kind of like an expectation that the house wins and everything, but instead what they do is they get you to go out and like recruit your friends, recruit your parents, recruit everybody, like, and of course everybody else is getting sucked into this horrible kind of like cult type thing. And they're all going to point at you. You're the person who introduced this thing that cost me a whole bunch of money and soaked up a bunch of my time, and then went on to like damage my own personal relationships. I mean, it's like almost kind of like this mind virus that spreads through the population in the sense that it jumps from one family member to another or one close friend to another. It's so insidious, and it's all just so some guy at the top can have a yacht or whatever. It's crazy.
Yeah.
What happened with that? Like, it took 2 years, but like maybe you can talk very quickly, because I don't want to focus. This isn't a show about like, bad beat stories from like getting scammed essentially. But like, what was it like for those 2 years, and like, at what point how did you see a path out of that?
Yeah, it was like I was always trying to meet new people to recruit them. I didn't really involve my family, because I was kind of ashamed of it. I kind of knew it was not a good thing, and I didn't want them to judge me, so I didn't even talk to them about it. Um, but like, yeah, I would go to the big, like I remember the guy that brought me in. I went with him on like a couple of road trips. I think one to Phoenix and a couple of to Dallas, which was the furthest. The Phoenix was like the farthest I'd ever been from
Yeah, where
home.
did you grow up, by the way? I don't even think
I
we
grew up in
established that.
Louisiana. I
Okay,
grew up
so
in
you grew up near
Shreveport.
Shreveport. Okay, and that's why
Yeah,
you went to the Shreveport school. Okay.
yeah, I was in Shreveport, which is basically I was a kid of the suburbs,
Yeah,
so I
likewise.
didn't ride an alligator to school or anything like that.
Yeah.
Um, like, yeah. So uh, shoot, where were we? Uh, but yeah, like
Road trips. Road
yeah, I
trips with the
remember.
guy that got you into it.
Yeah, so we would like, and I was buying like I spent more money on tapes than I did on like the products for the business because they're like, oh, you got to buy these tapes so you can stay motivated. And so I would like pop in a tape every time I'm driving. Like I'm going to work, I'm putting in a tape. I'm like going on these road trips. I'm like, we're putting in tapes. And like, so anytime I was like driving to Dallas or Fort Worth or whatever to like to find, to like try to find
Yeah.
people to recruit, I had these tapes. And so these tapes basically just brainwashed me. Like that was their whole thing, was their whole purpose of these tapes is to just keep you in. And it's insidious. So, but yeah, like I spent money on these trips, to go to these places and stuff, and like stay at these hotels and everything, and go to these big rah conferences. Um, but yeah, if anybody's in that and you're like, oh well, this guy just didn't try hard enough, like he's he failed because he wasn't really deep into it. It's like, man, I was as deep as you could get, and I was in no way slacking off or making excuses, and it
Yeah.
did not happen. Um, but the one thing that really I learned from that is um, from that experience is that if you're sitting on the couch night after night just watching TV and you're not building your future, you're going to stay where you are. And that was kind of like a running thing that like all the time that I was thinking of, like, I can't just sit here and watch TV. I need to be working on my future because while I'm young and healthy and have all this energy, I might as well, right? And then do the hard work now so I can have a great future later. But you don't need an MLM to do that. You can just do that. You can do it and build whatever future you want, as long as it's the right, uh, as long as it's the right vehicle for building it. And MLMs are not the right vehicle. They'll take you backwards. So, but yeah, so that's what kind of got me into so the way that I left the business is I told the guy, like, hey, I'm taking a break for the holidays, and then I never called him back or anything like that. Just dropped it. And he never came a calling either. So I'm sure he dropped out too. And that guy he was in the military and he was like on a local base and he had a house and he ended up selling his house and living in an apartment and like, yeah, it's not good. It's not good for anybody.
Yeah.
So, but yeah, that did ingrain in me to like work hard for your future. So once I left that next year is when I started, um, is when I like worked that second job, got that computer, and then once I had the computer and like messing around with that and got really comfortable with a computer and like fixing things that went wrong and like all that stuff. And this was like the nascent days of the internet. This was 95. Um, yeah, I had a lot of fun with that computer. I didn't do any programming. And then in the next year, or the end of, yeah, basically New Year's Day of 96, I was like, I want a job where I can feel like I'm doing something important. Like I can wake up and feel like I'm making the world better. Um, and like that I have like a mission, right? So, so I had an old friend that and had basically said like you can go into the army as an officer if you like go through this kind of like board interview and stuff. So I drove down to New Orleans and tried that. and I just didn't really have any experience to like lead people at all. So, which was good because I didn't have any experience to lead people. I
Yeah.
would have been awful. Um, and then that year, that spring, I walked into. I had been looking at looking at the Army and looking at the jobs that they have, and one of them was programmer. And so I was like, hot dog, they're gonna teach me how to program, and I'm gonna have a programming job. That's gonna be super. So um, I I knew that there was a test called the ASVAB, and it's like a vocational aptitude battery,
Yeah.
and it's a test you take to tell what job you'd be good at. And I I studied for the test so I could do as well as I could, because why not? So you're not supposed to study for it, but I
It's supposed to be
studied
an
for it.
aptitude, which
Yeah,
suggests that it's
yeah.
not something you study for. It's just you come in and
Uh,
be who you are. But I
but
mean, come on, every test
yeah,
can be studied for and prepared for, right?
yeah. But I think going along the side of like build your future. I was like, well, I want to be excellent at this. Like, I want to make my chances as best as I can make them. So yeah, so study for that test. I scored really well on the test. So they were like, you can kind of have any job you want. And we have this military intelligence thing where you could kind of live the James Bond life, and they're looking for people who can speak a foreign language. And I had done some German in high school. I wasn't very good at it, but um, they said if you do this, we can put you, like, if you do well on this test, we'll put you into military intelligence and send you to like language school and stuff. I was like, okay, cool. And like you'll have like top secret clearance and like live James Bond life. I was like, okay, let's go. Who needs programming? So yeah, I did well on that test, and the test is basically a it's a test that uses a fake language, and it just determines how well you can see patterns and understand like a language that isn't real, right? That has some logic to it, but um, yeah, but it's not a real language.
Yeah.
And so I did really well on that. So they put me into they put me in. They didn't say what language I was going to get, but like I went off to boot camp, did that whole thing, and then at the end of boot camp, they're like, okay, you're going to go to Defense Language Institute Foreign
Yeah.
Language Center, which is a it's basically it's kind of a military it's a school in Monterey, California, and there are like army, it's not like on a base, there's army barracks and stuff. I think people can go there. Like I think at the time maybe people could go there if like they were civilians and they wanted to pay the money. I don't know if that's a situation anymore, but
Yeah. I mean, they might send like reporters to it, maybe, because I
okay.
talked to like a New York Times reporter who had to like learn Mandarin in 6 months, which
Mhm.
is like a tall order.
Yeah.
I don't think he actually learned it. He learned as much as he could, and then they send him over there. But yeah, like this is like the elite, place that probably I've heard, and I'd love for you to like myth bust this. I've heard that
Okay.
like everything is like, they've done so much social science around this to like understand optimal ways of like acquiring a language and retaining things and learning very quickly and efficiently. So they probably have really good like pronunciation coaching and things like that. Like I am very excited to learn firsthand what that was like there, because I am somebody who studies a lot of foreign languages. I lived in China for
Mhm.
6 years. I studied Japanese before I studied Chinese, and I try to keep my language skills sharp. But I didn't have the benefit of the Defense Language Institute. I was just using flashcards and like reading
Yeah.
books and stuff. And I did do an intensive Chinese program in China, but with like where everything was in Chinese. The instruction was in Chinese. I didn't even have any English speaking classmates. My teacher couldn't speak English. Like it was just
Wow.
like Chinese.
Wow.
You had to like, what is it, sink or swim, basically.
Yeah.
And,
Wow.
But
So
what was your experience like?
so it was a 9 to 5 job. So you live in the barracks and you're doing your extra physical training, exercise, and all that, the army stuff. But then your job basically day to day, Monday through Friday, is to go to class. But our teachers. So this was 1996 to 97. So anybody going there now, like, this was a long time ago. So
Right.
things may have changed, but at the time, No, yeah, the teachers were bilingual, um, and they were trying out a new textbook course on us. So we were like the first to use this new uh, courseware. It was like all just it's all paper. It was all paper books at the time.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, it was like yeah, you're all day. You're just you're you're learning new words and pronunciation and vocabulary and grammar patterns and stuff, and you know reciting it in class and like and all that kind of stuff. But it's not like immersion where you have to like speak. I was in the Korean deal.
Hmm.
So if you do really well on that like language test, they'll put you into like Chinese or Korean or like what do they call a category 5 language? English
Yeah.
as well as a category 5 language because English is such a mess. It's hard to learn. So congrats. So my hat's off to everybody who's learned English as a foreign
Yeah.
language.
Any
Holy cow.
non-native English speakers listening to this,
Yeah.
kudos.
Well done. Yeah. Um, so but yeah, it wasn't like it was intensive as like it was what you were doing all day long, but it wasn't an immersive thing where like no English is allowed or anything like that. Like, but maybe that's changed. I don't know, uh, but I think it got me to. It was a 63-week course, so it was pretty long, and I feel like it got me up to a decent level of proficiency. Um, and it's funny as I was going through that course to kind of help myself. I took all the words from the textbooks and like stuck them into uh, like a text file, and I started messing around with like web development at the time. So I don't know, we're about to transition.
Yeah.
So because like the web was a thing, and like I liked to create, so I was like, well, I want to make like a website, and like I want to do something related to Korean because it's something I'm really into, and so uh, I want to play around with it. So I ended up like manually writing all of the words from the books into this website and like to make a little like a dictionary for myself. I had paper dictionary and all that stuff, but I was like, I just want to make something. So the first website I really made about Korea was called The Korean Situation, and it was really all it was articles that I copy pasted from around the web that had to do with like North and South Korea relations and stuff. And that lasted not long. And then I changed over to making a a Korean education website. It's called it Korean Online, and that's where I had the like the dictionary. But it was just like this is old school stuff. But like when I was learning, like didn't even know HTML at this point. So I was using a program called NetObjects Fusion, and it was like Word, and you would like enter text and put in pictures and all that stuff, and like you could change the fonts, and then you push a button and it would publish it. It would make it all HTML, and I would FTP that to like one of the cheap uh, hosts at the time.
Yeah. So literally
And
like dragging and dropping the HTML files
yeah, I didn't know
over
what they
to
meant.
a server, and then that would
Yeah,
be like literally rendered at the file path. So
yeah, I had
FTP back before Git
FTP,
and cloud and all this stuff.
FTP for the win. So yeah, I would just drag and drop those. I didn't know how to read the stuff or anything, um, but I did that, and then so uh, once school was, and I ended up getting an award for that website that I had put together, and so like when I graduated from school, so I was very happy about that. And this also, like you'll see this thread, I kind of go above and beyond, especially for things I'm passionate about, because I wanted to pass this class. Because if you don't pass the class with like, so there's levels of proficiency. It's like one, two plus, three plus, or whatever. But you have to get a two, and you have to get it in reading, writing, and listening. Reading, writing, no, reading, listening, and speaking. I don't think there's a writing portion. So you have to get a two in each of those. And if you don't, you either get kicked out or you have to repeat the whole thing again. And we had a guy in our
Wow, the
class
whole
who had
thing.
like, yeah, who had failed and like was repeating. man, that's
It's
rough.
like more than a year of your life.
Yeah.
So this is like high stakes exam.
So of course I wanted to knock it out of the park. And I ended up doing really well on reading. Like I was reading from like real Korean news sites and like reading news articles, which really upped my skills. But anyway, so like I didn't get a CS education. I didn't do computers in the army, and here I am in like now I'm in Korea. They sent us to Korea to do our the rest of our time. So for
Did
me
you have
that
a
was
4-year
2
tour?
years. So it took me 2 years. So there was boot camp, language school, and then after language school, once you get your security clearance, they send you to another school. I won't tell you where it is or anything or what we learned. But
Top secret.
But it was another army base, and we went there, and that's where we learned the skills to do our job, right? That involved like the Korean language, and that was for I don't even remember how long that was. It was a few months, and then once that was over, then it's like, okay, everybody, you're going to Korea. Here's your unit. You're going to It's funny, the people that had their name, I think it was like if you were A through M, then you went like up north to the like northern part of South Korea, not North Korea, but the northern part of South Korea, and like into the field. And
so the
people
field being like living in Seoul or something like that, or
living in,
was
like-
there like a military base up there that you were
living
near?
in like doing like field work in like tents and stuff.
Like literally the field.
Yeah. And then people that were like at the higher level of the alphabet, we went
So we
went to a different
last
base.
name basically.
Yeah.
So
And
Washam, the twist
Yeah.
of fate that your name is like at the very back end of the alphabetic order landed you in southern part, right?
Yeah. So it's not like but in South Korea, but just a different part. And like I had a
But
nice
like down there by like Busan or someplace like down that farther
no,
south.
not that far south, but it's what's today is called Camp Humphreys.
Camp Humphreys.
I don't know if they still do this job on Camp Humphreys, and I wouldn't want to give away too much OPSEC or any of that stuff.
Yeah, let's not.
I don't know where I don't know, like Camp Humphreys is like a amusement park now. Like it's
Interesting.
It's way better than what it was when I was there. Like we didn't even have internet. We had to go out of the base and into the to go to the what's called a PC bang or PC room.
Yeah.
And then that's where you got on the internet. And so I spent a lot of time in there. But like now they've got a water park and they've got like shopping malls and it's crazy. Like it's like you're living in the US now.
Yeah.
So kids today with their internet.
These spoiled army kids that like joined just 20 years later have all the amenities of like a university student with like
amazing. But anyway, so I was in South Korea and I was living on this base, and so I was doing my job, and I worked in a nice air conditioned like building. It was great. I didn't have to live in a tent. But so yeah, I looked out because I'm a W. But with and during that time, I was like, well, I want to like learn more. Like I don't want. At that point, I was kind of like, okay. As time went on, I was like, all right, this was fun, but I don't want to wake up every morning and do exercise like this and like basically not be able to take like vacation when I want or whatever, and like because you're serving your country, they're not serving you. Like you have to like you're limited in your freedoms, right? As a soldier.
Yeah,
which,
and my understanding is like basically all your rights as a normal civilian, like me as a natural born American citizen, I have all these rights. When you join the military, everything's like kind of like curtailed, and like even the courts and everything are like a completely different system, and like there's just like all these additional things imposed upon you. Obviously, I didn't serve in the military. I have profound respect for those who do, and for you. But yeah, like I get it. I can basically do what I want. Like I can just leave my job and go get another job and all that stuff. In the military, my understanding is like you get an assignment, and if you don't want to do it anymore, you can't just like quit, or you can't just like there's a lot less flexibility, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So I was like, this was a cool ride, and I learned some cool stuff. But like, I need to get out into the real world,
Yeah.
and have some of this freedom that I worked hard to preserve. So and I do feel like the mission I was there for was to help protect South Korea, and like I don't think at all that was like wasted. Like South Korea is a wonderful place, and great people, and the situation they're in with North Korea being their neighbor, and like the splitting of that country, and like the families that were divided during the Korean War, and like what's happened with North Korea. It's awful, but I'm glad I was able to to do my small part. So I knew that I was gonna have to like kind of get out into the real world, and I was like, well, let's get back to computers, John. Let's get this thing started back up again. So I started learning Visual Basic, and I didn't know really anything. Like I didn't know what it was about, but it was kind of a thing at the time, and because it was so different from what I learned on like my little computer, my little TRS-80 and stuff, and I let's see. Yeah, and then like I was interested in web development, and I wanted to do I wanted to keep going with Korean, so I thought, well, I'll
Yeah.
do a job with like programming and Korean, and like maybe I'll do like translation and write the software, somewhere. So I started learning programming, but I was like, I don't know what I'm doing with Visual Basic. Like it's all this drag and drop stuff, and I don't know what any of this is. And so I picked up a C++ book, and that didn't make it any easier. Because it was all like, well, now you got ints and floats and bools, and I'm like, everything was just whatever it was when I was, programming in
Yeah.
BASIC. And so I was like, well, this is pretty rough. But all the kind of the while I was trying to learn this stuff, I was still like working on my website and trying to make it better, but like through this drag and drop software. So I was like, well, I'm going to teach myself web development. And at the time, like it was the .com boom, and like I heard somebody say, like, dude, if you know HTML, you can get hired. Like it's like just like you need to get in here now. And so I was like, okay, I'm going to teach myself web development. So and at the time, at the time I met this lovely lady through a friend, and she was taking English classes at. So my friend, he's a Mormon, and
Mm-hmm.
they would do like these free English classes for like people, like Korean people that wanted to come in. So she was attending that, and I told him, I was like, yeah, I just want to meet somebody nice, and like not some like crazy party person or anything, but just like somebody who, I can like, settle down with, and like not settle down, but like just have like a nice, like a good life with, and somebody I can, build a real relationship with. And he's like, oh, I got the girl for you. She's the sweetest thing. And so I was like, okay, great. So we met, and fell in love. And so, um, but I knew like the plan was like, okay, when the army's over, and like now at this point, it was like the end was getting close, because I had spent
Yeah.
2 years in school and like 2 years in South Korea, and the time was coming short. So I was like, okay, well, I'm going to learn web development. And while I'm doing that, I want to stay in country so I can be with her and like also make some money. So I got a job as an English teacher, and so at the same time I had got the job as the English teacher is when I bought my first book. Actually, my wife bought it for me. It was in a Korean bookstore, and it was like Webmaster in a Nutshell, I think, from O'Reilly. And so I
Yeah.
took that and I started learning HTML, and then so as I was teaching during the day, and so I was teaching English, but it was like a lot of kids. So like in the morning, it was like real little kids, and then like as the day went on, the kids got like older and older because they're like getting out of school and stuff. And so it was like little kids to kind of high middle school, like almost high school. And then in the evening, they also had like an adult class where I was teaching some of the older folks.
Yeah.
So, well, older than me, but at the time. And so I would teach during the day, and then at night I would go back to my little apartment that the school paid for, which was great. Like little one, it was just a one room. It was like a little studio, no air conditioning. It was awful. But I would sit and like on my computer, and I was like learning HTML and learning CSS and JavaScript um, and and that's what I did until like way early in the morning, like 3, 4, 5 in the morning, and then I would like uh, go to sleep for a little bit and then wake up and like get back to school. I was not a good teacher. I did not have a passion for teaching. It was a way to make money. I feel like I wasn't terrible. I had a lot of fun. Like I was, but teaching kids is a challenge. That was the hardest job I ever had in my life. Um, and so my hat's off to all the teachers out there. Teaching is hard.
Yeah.
So, but yeah, I did that. I did. Uh, so at night I'm like learning all this like web tech, and here's a real hint for folks that are like looking to change to a different career and do something different. Look at job postings for the job you want and look at the requirements that they list, because I didn't know what to study. Like I knew HTML was a thing, but like so I looked through all these job boards and probably looked at 100 jobs and just made a list on the side of like every time I saw some technology, I would put like a little, put a check
Little
by it
tick
or
next to it.
whatever,
Yeah.
right? Like a little
So you're kind of
mark by
like
it.
building like almost like a distribution of the skills that are
Yeah,
generally sought by the market, by
yeah.
employers.
And at the time, it was uh, it was HTML, CSS. CSS was new when I was
Yeah.
learning it. Like it was kind of the new hot thing. And then JavaScript, uh, Perl was huge at the time, and
Yeah.
then like Java and SQL and stuff. So I was like, okay, I'm going to learn CSS, HTML, JavaScript, Perl. I'm going to learn SQL, and then if I have time, I'll learn some like Java and stuff.
Yeah.
But those 5 skills, not Java, but like those 5 skills is how I got hired. So I spent a year as a teacher, and then near the end of that, I was like, okay, it's time to start putting out some resumes. And I sent a bunch of resumes all over the U.S. because like I would take a job anywhere, right? And my motivation at the time was twofold. One, I wanted to have a cool programming job, but two, I needed to be able to take care of my wife when we got to the U.S. Like I didn't want her to have to work and to help support us. Like she speaks English. Like at the time, she spoke English pretty well, but it wasn't
Yeah.
like fluent or anything. And I was like, I want to if she's coming to the U.S. with me, I want to support her. I don't want her to have to feel some burden because moving to a different country is burden enough.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Yeah.
So,
So yeah.
so you applied for jobs all over the U.S.
Hmm.
and with your nascent programming skills, and it sounds
Hmm.
like even back then you were a big fan of doing research on the job market, which of course your big project that you're very well known for is essentially a giant research project.
Yeah.
But like where did you ultimately get a job?
At a little company in Seattle that it served the mortgage industry, so like mortgage lenders and stuff. And so we would like we had information on like mortgage rates and things like that, and we built tools for lenders and originators to do mortgages. So yeah, and I did that for 4 years, and then moved on to like a smaller company where it was. And so while I think 6 months after I got that first job, I was already starting to feel the itch of like doing something else. Not that the job wasn't great, but it's like a guy I worked with, we were like, we could start a startup. We could start our own like little company. So it's like, okay, yeah, let's do that. And he's like, have you heard of PHP? And I was like, yeah, I've heard of PHP. I don't know any of it. And he's like, yeah, let's build this new thing in PHP. And so what we built was a website. It was kind of like a Squarespace. But this was 2002 and 2003 that we built this. And it was like, yeah, it was like you'd like enter your text and you'd like upload pictures and stuff like that, and like you'd make the website. It was kind of like, it wasn't cool like Squarespace is today. I mean, come on.
Yeah, but it essentially was like a precursor to the kind of like build your own website, like low code tools almost.
Yeah, this was a no code thing, and I had to learn so much to do it. Like I had to learn how to like I had. So to get that first job, I had done a couple of things. One, I had kept building that Korean website, and I had turned the dictionary into a Perl thing using a database. And sorry, I bumped my mic. And then the other thing was I built a website for the school, and I built them a forum, and also just in Perl with like I don't even remember what kind of database was. It was like some flat file database though. And so in order to get that figured out, I had to like figure out like how to set up Apache and everything. So with this new business, I had to figure out all sorts of stuff. Like, yeah, like there's Apache, and we also wanted to allow people to like have an email address and like get mail and stuff. So I'm setting up like a mail servers, and like I had to figure out DNS and like all these different things to build this, and like of course learn PHP as well.
This is great. So it's basically like goal directed learning. Like I have to do XYZ, so I just need to learn how to do this. And so you were essentially teaching yourself. It sounds like over the course of years, just maintaining this big project, which is something I always advocate to people. Have a big project that you continue to maintain and extend over time, so you can continue to bring more skills into the fold and use it as an excuse to learn and practice with different tools and technologies. And I mean, you did precisely what I encourage people to do. And you just kind of independently were feeling around in the dark. This was long before there were accepted best practices in learning the code and things like that. But so you built this Squarespace-like website using PHP, which, Wix, there's so many, like WordPress itself. Also a big PHP LAMP stack project, LAMP being like Linux, Apache, PHP, and MySQL, yeah. So that stack is probably something similar to what you were working with, and that's what everybody worked with in the early 2000s. It was cutting edge at the time, and a lot of people still use it. Like I think Facebook still uses PHP for some of their code base, for example. What was the startup like? Like, what were the early days like? Were you able to acquire customers?
Yeah. So I like building things, but I don't like selling things. So my business partner, he had there was a church that he went to, and he ended up selling the idea to them, and so they signed up and stuff. But we didn't have, we had that customer, and I don't even remember what other customers we had. That might have been it. And we spent nights and weekends for about a year and a half building this thing, and we were actually living in his basement at the time, because it's cheaper to live, and we could also work on the business. And
it's like a true kind of like garage startup.
Yeah, true garage startup, basement startup in this case, and but yeah, it didn't really go anywhere. But through all that learning of building that's how I got my next job, because they were looking for like a PHP person who could do kind of a little bit of everything, and that was me. And it was a really small software company in Redmond, and I think it like we were just in a little tiny office at first.
Yeah.
I feel like it was like maybe 6 people or something.
Yeah. And
But I
Redmond,
loved it. I
Redmond's a
loved
suburb of Seattle.
Yes.
And
Yeah,
it's where Microsoft is based. Largest corporation in the world, right? And Amazon's like not far from there. So you were already in this region with like tons of software. Like you were in the right place where a lot of activity was happening, right? There's probably Silicon Valley and then there's Redmond. Okay, so you were able to parlay your skills that you acquired, even though the project didn't really work out. Everything you learned along the way, just like you were able to ladder that over into an opportunity. Tell us a little bit about like, were you working on a team? How many devs were you working alongside?
So I was the only. So there was the guy who ran it. He was an ex-Microsoft person. There are a lot of people who work at like big companies. They end up getting tired of it and they like want to break out on their own. And he was one of those folks. So he was ex-Microsoft, like classically trained CS guy and stuff. And so I worked alongside him. Like I worked on the website and like the cart and checkout system for that, and like and then but it was a software company, so they were selling software, and the people doing that development was him and this team in I don't know if it was Ukraine or Russia at the time, but outsourced that, and then he would work closely with them, and like I wouldn't have been able to understand any of the stuff that they wrote at the time, but they did that, and then I took care of the website, and I did that for a couple of years until he had to like lay off a bunch of people because business is rough. Running your own business, that's not easy.
Where did you go from there?
So from there, and at this point, I felt like I was kind of becoming like a hot commodity because I could do your database stuff and your server stuff and like write all your websites and do all your interactions.
So you were like
and everything.
An original full stack developer.
OG full stack. So I was like, okay, I got what it takes. Like I'm not scared. Like I can find a place now. And I actually found a job on Craigslist, and it was a company whose customers were medical coders, so people who like take medical procedures and turn those into like codes for insurance and stuff. So I was writing software for that, and basically it was my job was to take all this like reference material that they had and make it searchable, and so you could find the information you needed and like references for that data and stuff.
Yeah.
Because if you do the wrong medical stuff, it's bad. It's serious.
Yeah, that's
or
like
people,
fraud.
Yeah, or if people don't get their claim.
And you're not upsetting some random person. You're potentially upsetting the customer, but you're also potentially upsetting Medicare, which is a big giant agency with the government that will throw you in jail.
So I did that for a few years, and during that time, during the time of like working at the little other company, I was like, I want to start another business, but I don't want to I just want to do it myself. I don't want to have like a co-founder or anything. I just want to make it and like run it. And so I made one called Photo Grinder, and it was because I saw some like Craigslist posting where somebody was asking for like, hey, I've got all these pictures and I need to add like watermarks to them, or I need to add like change them to black and white or resize them or something. And so I thought, I could make a tool for that. So it's basically a tool where you uploaded a bunch of photos, and then you select all the transforms you wanted to do to those photos, like resizing or cropping or adding noise or like whatever you wanted to do. It was kind of like Photoshoppy.
Yeah.
And then so you would select it and you hit go, and then you'd pay for it, and then I would like generate all the transform all the files.
It's just like FFmpeg or something on the back end. Like, how are you doing it?
It was ImageMagick on the back end.
ImageMagick, okay.
Yeah, so if you know how to use ImageMagick, you could have just done it yourself, but who knows how to use all these obscure tools. So I did that. That got a few customers, but it was just kind of a fun thing to make. I didn't think I was gonna get rich off of it, but I was always looking for ways to like make some extra money. Um, yeah, so I did that, and then kind of when I was in at that new job, I kind of took a break from stuff, but I kept improving the Korean website. Like that thing along this all this time was just kind of keep going. And so I did turn on like monetization for that, and I gave people access to a forum and like gave them access to kind of like unlimited like dictionary searches, and I made all these extra tools on top of it, like a translation helper and basically all the stuff to add value so that you would want to pay like $5 a month for that. And that's called Z Korean. That's still around, but there are way better tools out there nowadays. So like that you can get dictionaries online for free.
Yeah.
And translate for free. Like you can do everything you want in Korean without paying me $5 a month.
That's quite a sales pitch.
Thank you. Don't sign up now.
Awesome.
Yeah.
So you're still like at this point, it's been years, and you're still maintaining and extending. And it sounds like you're like a traditional webmaster in the sense of like, what are people asking for? The one thing that like thread that I see going through all this is like you're seeing some sort of external stimulus, some sort of cue from like some person posting on Craigslist, or like, hey, I've got this problem, or like my classmates have this problem. They need a better tool for, referencing their Korean vocabulary or something. And like you're taking action. You're like, I can do this, and so you have this confidence where you can like learn things, and then you can build something to address that underlying need. And that's what business is all about, right? People think business is about flying on private jets and wearing a fancy suit and like shaking hands with some old dude, But
well, if you do it right.
Yeah, if you do it right.
I didn't do it right.
Yeah, it's just like build something that people want, right? Like figure out what it is people need and give it to them, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's cool.
Yeah.
So
a lot of businesses you see are basically people creating something that doesn't solve any problem. It's like, I just want to make money. Hopefully this will hit and like we can all get rich, but nobody's interested or they don't see you solving enough of a problem that they want to pay you for it.
Yeah. I mean, getting people to open their wallets, it's like the hardest thing on earth, unless you're just like literally like, you could start a business right now. You could probably go to another curb, set up a lemonade stand, and you might get some people to give you lemonade, but then how do you scale that? How do you figure out a way to like automate that so you're not just constantly tethered to that lemonade stand? Anyway, this isn't a business podcast, but I do want to point out that like a lot of people have misconceptions about business. They see Shark Tank or something like that, and they're like, by the way, one of our former podcast guests, Jabril's, the YouTube creator, has fake Shark Tank. And it's just like he wrote like all these prompts and all the software to like have GPT generate fake Shark Tank pitches and the reactions. It's great. It's like, and there's video too. You can see like all those sharks like, that's a terrible idea. What about the liability? Like all these ridiculous ideas. So again, shout out to Jabril's for coming on. That's another episode you can check out. A great interview and watch some of his fake Shark Tank. But the thing I'm like to point out, like, I'm not going to try to teach you business here or anything like that, but I will tell you, like, there's a lot more to business than what you're going to see on like TikTok or Instagram or something like that. Like, it looks a lot more like what John's doing and a lot less like the flashy stuff you see.
Yeah. I think the best businesses are created by people who know of a problem that can be solved with your technology. They're willing to pay for it, and the person that is kind of behind it all is a subject matter expert in this field and knows the market and knows what they need. Like if I'm trying to start let's say I'm trying to start a company and like I want to start selling like industrial mixers to like the restaurant industry. And I know nothing about that, but I'm like, I see a place in the market where we could like make money on like maybe cheaper mixers or something like that. That's a terrible idea, because even if it's something that you think could be really good, if you don't know anything about that market, you're not going to be able to reach those people. So it's and as ideas
I'm always
are
fond
easy.
of pointing out, ideas are easy. And also another trap that people fall into that's related to what you just said. First time founders focus on technology. Second time founders focus on distribution. Precisely what you were saying. Like, you don't know the chefs. You don't know the people working in all these restaurants. You don't understand why they're using this mixer instead of some cheap mixer that you can order off Alibaba or something, right? So, yeah. Okay, so to get back to just like your entrepreneurial journey. So, you know, you got Z Korean, which you made a very impassioned sales pitch for earlier. You've got just these other things you've been building over time, like the photo grinder, I think is what you said.
Yeah.
So you are at this point, I guess, technically a serial entrepreneur. Did you ever like sell any of your companies or anything like that? Or did they just like stay kind of in your stable of like cash cows slowly generating revenue over time?
Yeah, I call myself a parallel entrepreneur.
Parallel entrepreneur.
Yeah, because I just run all of them at the same time. But no, I didn't sell any of them. You know, back in '99, I remember I was like on a military exercise, and I got an email from some company, and it was like, "Hey, we want to buy your dictionary." And I forget how much money, but they were like, "You need to have at least 25,000 entries." And I was like, "I don't have that many in there." And so
25,000, like that's more than the typical vocab of like an English speaker.
yeah, it's a lot, but yeah, so I had to pass on that, but it got me thinking like, you could make some, you could sell something, make some money. And then back in so I kind of jumped around to a bunch of jobs. Like every few years, I was jumping, getting bored and jumping to some other place. And I started while I was at one place like that had big, like it was a new startup, had big funding, but after about a year and a half, we were like, yeah, this is not living up to the original premise, so we're going to pivot. That's when I started to think of like, okay, I'm kind of burned out on like this. Let me see if I can find something interesting that I can do nights and weekends, and like let's just make more money, right? So I had an idea that I won't say this in like, this is not a great origin story, but I was like reading TechCrunch on the toilet, and something, I can't find the article that spurred this thought, but it spurred this thought of have a way for businesses and customers to communicate anonymously by text message, so the business can get feedback and the customer can give the feedback freely, knowing that they're not going to get hassled, but the business can respond to the customer and like fix the issue, but they can have this conversation where they don't see each other's phone number. So that turned out to be Talk to the Manager, which was like the final like business that I made.
Yeah.
Which is still going. But what I did for that was, because I thought, well, this would be great for restaurants, but I'm not in the restaurant industry, right? Here we go again. But at that point, I was pretty steeped in the startup world, and I was like going to like startup like meetups, and I watching Shark Tank.
Wow.
Like
yeah,
all that
yeah.
stuff.
So you were like in the business, kind of like meta, so to speak.
Yeah, and I knew that there were tons of startups in Seattle, like tons of them, a lot of ex-Microsoft folks and all that, and lots of investment money from people who used to be, work at Microsoft and now have like tons of money from all their stock that they had because they were in the 80s or whatever.
Yeah, there's something like 10,000 Microsoft millionaires who just had like some very small portion of stock, but there was so much, money value created, I guess, that they have millions of dollars worth of stock, even if they were like, just like a entry-level software engineer or something like that.
Yeah, because if you look at like the trajectory of Microsoft between like the early 90s and 2010, if you got in the 90s, man, yeah, you made a bundle. If you were able to, stick it out and invest, of course. But I was like, okay, let's do another startup. But I knew I had a formula in mind for a startup, and that was to not go after customers. Like, don't go straight to the consumer, right? Because most consumers, like, they don't have a lot of money to slosh around anyway. I mean, I guess they do now because like streaming's making big bucks and all, but I think we're all getting like subscription fatigue. But like most people aren't going to spend 20, 30 bucks a month on something unless it gives them a great amount of value. And I knew I wasn't going to make any money trying to sell for $5 a month, right? You can't even run ads that, for $5 a month to get enough people to sign up. So I was like, okay, I need the price point to be higher. And in order to do that, I should go after businesses. And so this was perfect for that because it let businesses communicate with their customers, but it also like the business was paying for it. So, so what I did was before I built it, when I was still kind of ideating this thing, I went to a local restaurant and I said, hey, can I talk to the manager real quick? I want to like bounce an idea off. And so we sat down and like I bounced the idea off and I was like, yeah, this is what I think it would be. Like, what do you think? And she's like, yeah, that's pretty good. I was like, yeah, would you pay for this? Like, and she's like, yeah, I'd pay for that. And then through some like contacts, I reached out to other business people, like not even in Washington, but in other states. They were like, hey, my cousin or my friend owns a restaurant or wherever, you can talk to them. And so I validated that it was not a junk idea, right? Because at this point, I was very precious with my time and I did not want to sacrifice time away from my wife if I had to, and like for something that's just like a dumb ego pursuit, right? So, because to me that felt like is just being selfish, right?
Yeah.
So, so I was like, this needs to be something real if I'm going to invest the time I'm going to invest into it. So, so I validated that it was a good idea, and then I spent, I want to say like 3 or 4 months, nights and weekends, just jamming on this thing till, midnight, 2 a.m. or whatever, and then like all weekend long, I'm just in front of the computer. So it's a lot of, any pursuit, it takes a lot of sacrifice. And I think if it's for, improving your family's position and like being able to retire and not worry about like not having enough money when you retire and stuff, I feel like you really need to be precious with your time and have a good motivation for it. So, I thought, well, maybe I could get rich from this, but also thought, well, if I go high enough, if I set my goals high enough and it falls short, then I've still made it worth it, right?
Aim for the stars. Even if you don't make it, maybe you'll hit the moon. Like yeah.
So I thought, if like 10% of the businesses in America use this, like, man, I'm rich, right? I'm big rich. So so I built it, and then I sent out a bunch of letters to people. This was getting close to I launched close to the time where South by Southwest was happening. Back when, South by Southwest is still a thing, but back in like 2012, it was like the startup, sort of like where startups launched. So I reached out to all the big restaurants around there and like, the ones that get like a lot of the press and stuff during that time. And I was like, okay, I'm going to reach out to them, give it to them for free, send them signs and everything they can put on their tables and stuff. And then that will be like free marketing for me. And none of them responded. None of them cared. And I tried to call and like, that didn't work either. So, so I just kind of, my marketing for this was really terrible, but like I'm not a marketing guy. So I tried to also tried to send out letters to like around like Seattle. That didn't result in like really anything. And then
Well, I mean, to like jump forward a little bit,
let's do that.
Just to reassure people, like, you thrashed. Essentially, it sounds like you were trying a lot of different things. Not everything worked, but eventually it did work because I'm on Talk to the Manager, which is a great product name. I mean, it's like very literal. As somebody who created FreeCodeCamp, I can
Uh-huh.
appreciate literalness and unambiguity in what you're doing here. Join these customers: Burger King, Papa John's, Yogurtland, the Texas State Aquarium. That's cool. I'm here in Texas, so it's cool to know that if I go to the aquarium, I can potentially, anonymously text the people and be like, "Hey, I noticed there was like a mop just sitting on the floor or something like that." I don't know what. How did you get this to work?
So, it did take off. Like, I remember my wife and I, we were like watching a movie, and I got an email. It was like, "You got a customer sign up." I was like, "What?" And I think it was like a fireworks stand or something. Like, it was like something totally out of the blue. And so we started, like, I put out some blog content, and nobody had an article on. There was no article on Wikipedia about comment cards, so I made a page, and like at the bottom I was like, talk to the manager and like the links or whatever. So that actually got a pretty decent amount of like hits, and then I had a blog post about how comment cards are terrible, and here this is a way better way to go, and that one did really well until SEO stopped working. So that was good, but I also I had also brought in like a consultant to kind of help, and soon, like when we were going to start working together, I was on an airplane with and was sitting next to someone who was like from the Food Beast, which is a big food blog, restaurant blog. And so I was like, "Hey, could you say something about my business? Like, because it's really cool, and I think it would be really helpful for people." And so they did put out that, and that caused a big boom, like a big viral boom.
Wow.
And
Ask and you shall receive, right? Like,
yeah.
if you'd been too polite, like, "Oh, I don't want to impose upon this stranger sitting next to me on the airplane. He already had the displeasure of sitting next to me for the last 2 hours," or something like that. Now I'm asking him to go out and use his professional, platform to. No, but you asked, right? You were bold, and you just probably like figuring like 90% chance he says no, or he says yes, but he doesn't actually do it. Yeah, you took your shot. That's great.
Yeah, and I was attending a lot of startup meetups, so I would like run into people, and so I ran into this consultant, and she was like, "Yeah, I can help your business and stuff," and like, I don't remember very much about what she did, but it did help. Oh, she got it into another blog, like restaurant blog, and then that also like took off. So it was kind of like a 1-2 punch, and so that was great. And then like it was like on the news all over the place.
Wow.
So
okay, great. So kind of guerrilla marketing with Wikipedia, which may or may not break their terms of service, but like essentially getting some backlinks, SEO, and then PR. It sounds like essentially.
Yeah. So, but like over the years, and like I did bring in, so through a local startup kind of community, I brought in a co-founder who's he's a college student, and he was studying entrepreneurship, and so okay, I'll bring in this guy, and he can kind of help with like the marketing of things and stuff, and together we went to like the local restaurant convention, and we joined like the local restaurant association, did some ads with them, and we did the Chicago National Restaurant Association show, which is like it's like the biggest, it's huge, and we were in their restaurant technology area. But like honestly, none of the trade shows helped at all, and I don't really know why, but I feel like a lot of restaurant owners, like they're busy, and I did make the product with the idea of like these folks are busy and they don't have time to like learn a new tool or mess around with something. So those that do use it see benefit, and it's easy to like basically it takes 2 minutes to set up and you're like off to the races. But I feel like a lot of business owners are like, I don't need one more thing. Like I've got enough headaches. Like I don't want to try anything new, and I don't blame them at all for that. So especially with they've got people, salespeople talking to them all the time about things
Yeah.
that are going to change their business. So it just never really hit. And I did Instagram ads and Facebook ads and Google ads, and like talked with a Google ad like employee who was like a consultant, or like he was trying to like help increase the business and stuff. Yeah, and if you're trying to launch some new product that nobody is searching for on Google Ads, like, yeah, you got to give that up, because if they're not searching for it, you're going to get dinged when you try to show it to them,
Yeah.
because it's not a relevant search. So, um, yeah, so like the business where it is, it's like it's good. Like, can I quit my job and like retire? No, but it's a good side income, and it's like, uh, so I'm glad to have it, but I've kind of reached my end as far as like what I can do with it. And I've
Yeah.
had a couple of companies come like knocking on the door and saying, hey, we're interested in potentially buying your business and stuff. But since there's really no like, they would have to invest so much, I think, at this point into getting like putting the marketing and everything behind it. It's just um, it, yeah, it's not worth
Yeah.
it for them to buy. So, so I keep it going and I keep it up to date, and you know,
Yeah.
but it's pretty easy because like all the bugs have really been fixed, and like it's kind of on autopilot, which is great, really great.
So it's kind of like just a mature product in a suite of products, like a lot of, I guess you could call them like, I guess side hustle people,
Hmm.
like Peter Levels, for example, Levels.io. He starts a ton of different projects, and most of them don't go anywhere, but some of the ones he do are just generating revenue, and he's able to strap together all these different businesses, and that provides for his lifestyle.
Hmm.
So it sounds like you tried a lot of things, and this one was the one that worked, and it was a modest success. It's worth keeping it going and everything. But at the
Hmm.
same time, uh, is this when you started to consider going and getting like a job as a software engineer?
Yeah, so we're coming to the crest of the wave here.
All right,
Um,
100 minutes in, we're there. We're going to start talking about it. The thing that everybody tuned in for.
yeah, it's like yeah, it's like I started this on Monday. It's Wednesday, still not to the point yet.
Yeah.
Uh, how many commutes I got to do to
Well,
get to this to get
it's
to the
like
point?
it's like if you want to make like Texas barbecue or something, you don't just like throw it in and like it takes all day, right?
Yeah.
Like I hope that like and again to the audience, I've established that like I don't edit these because I want you to feel like you're really listening to this conversation that John and I are having, like unfiltered, full access, and a big part of these conversations is like, yeah, there's a lot of context that goes into these things, a lot of little stories that I like to tease out of my guests. And I like to step back and give the conversation plenty of room and not make us feel like we're on this regimented rails thing, plowing through, trying to hit all the highlights and end at the 1 hour mark.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah, this is great. This
yeah.
is great.
and it's been great learning so much about you. And again, like John has never publicly talked about this stuff to my knowledge, other than on his blog, which I am linking to in the show notes. He's got tons of blog posts from, I don't know, like 10 years or something. It's like a huge amount of blog posts over the years. And I learned a great deal from reading those, and I hope you do too. But now we're going for the main course, Coding Interview University. Let's go.
Yeah. So I was working at a company that was out of Chicago. So I was working remotely, and I saw that the business was going well, and I had like a little dashboard that said like what the revenue was and everything, and like customer churn and all that. And I was like, you know what? I think I could quit my job and just do this full time and like really like give it my all as far as like marketing this thing. This was before I realized it. Like,
Yeah,
yeah,
it was like a kind of a lifestyle business, so to
yeah,
speak, rather than like a venture stage business.
yeah. So I thought, and we did try to get we tried to get angel investors in the beginning, and we were actually in a few competitions, and like we tried to get into Techstars and stuff, but yeah, we never took investment, so which is good. I never had to, there's no convertible bonds I have to pay back or anything like that. It's like it's free and clear. So no investors on the hook I have to please. So yeah, so I was like, okay, I think I can quit my job and do this full time. And I talked to my wife, and she's like, yeah, yeah, let's give it a go. And we can, kind of see where we are in like 6 months or something like that. And so my motivation was high to like turn this into like a big thing, so I didn't have to go back to like a job. Um, and soon after, I noticed that I had made some errors on my little dashboard,
Oh
and
no.
the customer account wasn't what I expected. And I was like, oh no, this is
So you
bad.
made like a life-changing decision based on bad data.
Yeah, yeah,
No biggie, we'll fix that.
yeah. Oops, oopsie. Little bug there. So, but yeah. So after I noticed that, I was like, well, and by the time I noticed that, I was like, I don't like. I had tried a whole bunch of stuff, and it was just, yeah, I just was not seeing any growth, and I was like trying to do like viral content, and like it wasn't going viral, and trying to, uh, yeah, I was trying to do anything I could, anything I could think of, and like no bad ideas, just do it all, because nothing was hitting. So I was like, man, I'm gonna run out of money at some point, and that's not good, right? I'm gonna burn through my savings and might have to like dip into my, the little money that I have invested and like start, you know, converting that and like,
Yeah.
uh,
So there's this
it,
time bomb
yeah,
essentially,
time bomb.
and yet, like rather than just rushing out and just getting another job that looked very similar to the job you had before, you had a different idea, one that might seem counterintuitive because like the hill climbing algorithm, right? Like, do
Hmm.
I actually have enough cash on hand that I can go all the way down this hill and climb up this higher hill that I see over here?
So I was like, um, so remember back in when I was talking about like getting that one job and I felt like
Yeah.
I was like the thing. I was like, man, I can get a job anywhere. Like I rock. Well, during this time, I was listening to a lot of, still listening to like a lot of startup stuff. So This Week in Startups was one of the startup podcasts I listened a
Yes,
lot to.
Jason Calacanis. I've been on This Week in
Yeah.
Startups.
Oh,
If
cool,
you want to
cool.
hear my interview, I had very bad mic quality.
Okay. Um, and um, but on that, there was an episode. This was like 2015. Was it 2015? Yeah, it was late 2015 when I was like, doing my business full time. And this guy he had on was basically running the shop where they would like, oh, you need a website, you need like registration, and you need like a whatever database like for your customers and this and that, and like all these solutions. He's like, yeah, you just come to us and we've everything's pre-written libraries and we'll like snap it together and like give it to you. And that scared me. I was like, oh man, I can't compete with that. Like, I'm just a little old PHP developer. Like, I don't like. That's gonna make it really hard to get a job if like that kind of thing grows and like you only need 100 people
Yeah.
or 200 people in your company to build solutions for thousands of businesses. And so it kind of scared me. And in hindsight, like I haven't heard anything from that company since. So, but it was a nice kick in the pants because I realized that like I PHP is good and PHP has definitely paid the bills for many years, but like it's on the decline and like yeah, a lot of the web is built on it, like Magento and WordPress and like Facebook is a highly optimized, highly modified version of PHP, but like I've um I'm like I feel like that's nearing its end and I need to do something else, but uh the web had changed out from under me, right? Like so full stack of what I was used to was lamp stack and now full stack is like Angular or React and Node and JavaScript. And I was like, man, I'm so behind. I don't know any of this stuff, right? So I was like, okay, well, I got a choice here. I can learn all of this new stuff and get up to speed with it, but then do the same jobs that I've always done, which is web development and making people's like sign up forms and registration systems and pulling stuff from a database and putting it on the screen in a nice table. Like can learn to kind of like relearn all that and do the same job I've done before, or I can learn computer science and build anything. Like I could build a database, I could build, stuff for rockets, I could build really any
Yeah.
solution, right? It doesn't have to be a web solution. So I was like, well, if I'm going to do anything, I'll do that, and then that opens me up to a wider world of opportunities, right, where there's more jobs than just web development, right? Um, and also like was getting older. I was in my 40s, and I was like, I want to have and I'm tired of startups. I'm tired of like working all the time, like nights and weekends all the time, and not having time like with my wife and like enjoying life. Like I should be enjoying life where I am right now,
Hmm.
and I'm still just working as hard as I ever have. So I was like, I don't want to do startups anymore. Like if I'm going to go back to a job, I want it to be like a really good job with a really good salary, and I don't want to have to worry about like my professional future, and I don't want to have to worry about like our financial future. So getting a job at like one of the big companies uh, was top of my list. One of the big reasons is if you're new to this stuff, like I was, I had never written statically typed languages. Like I didn't know I didn't know a float from a double. So um, if I'm new at this and I'm going to be starting a new job, I need to be at a place where they can like let you come in kind of dumb and then help and mentor you to get you up to like their level. And bigger companies have this bandwidth because they have big teams and lots of people. And so they can kind of handhold you a little bit if you're new, because most of the people are coming straight out of college. But even people straight out of college had more experience writing like Java or C++ than I did. So I needed that mentorship, and then I also needed a place that was just going to be able to, I could grow in for the rest of my career. Because I really wasn't interested in going back to like little companies or little startups where there was a lot of risk and that company may not be around, or the founder may be terrible, and like you're going to want to jump
Yeah.
anyway or something. So that's why I went for the big companies. And Google was Google was not it was the goal, but only as far as the aim for the stars, and if you fall short, you hit the moon,
Yeah.
right? 'Cause everybody wants to work at Google, but everybody can't work at Google. And Google doesn't want everybody to work at Google. Like they only want like the best of the best, right? And I knew I wasn't the best of the best, but could I get pretty darn good in like a year? I was like, yeah, I could do that. Um, so so I was like, yeah, I'm gonna take the shot and just learn the stuff. And the thing that really
Awesome.
kicked off like that planted the seed of like learning computer science was when I was back at that little tiny software company working with that ex-Microsoft guy. He was like he was like, John, you need to learn about like computer science concepts so that when I talk about like, the big O or like linear algorithms or like whatever, like, do you know what I'm talking about? Like
Yeah.
you need to be able to understand the stuff if you're going to be in the computer world and be able to like solve problems efficiently. And I was like, okay. So back then, it was like 2007, I had picked up a bunch of books that were on like the MIT book list. Like
Yeah.
there was a MIT Open Courseware thing, and they had a list of books.
Oh
And
yeah.
so,
Great resource.
hmm
Yeah. I mean, and I can see like a clear kind of lineage in coding interview university going back to the MIT Open Courseware
hmm
reading list and things like that. I just want to jump in with two quick things.
yeah,
First, the difference between a double and a float. If anybody's curious, they're two different, I guess, data types. And a float is like a decimal. It's just a fancy name for a number that can include a decimal. And a double, a float is 4 bytes, I believe, and a double is 8 bytes. So you can just have a whole lot more digits in your number, essentially. So when he says, I didn't know the difference between a float and a double, I actually didn't know that myself. I had to look it up while you were talking. Because I was like, what is a double? Because I've never really done C++.
yeah,
But like one of the analogies that I would make to, so when I was studying Chinese, I go over there and Chinese is not like a language that a ton of people are studying. In like 2003, when I was over there, when I first arrived, I stayed there for like 6 years. I established and worked in a lot of different capacities. There were a lot of people who were like, I'm not going to learn Chinese characters. It's just too much work. And so it's kind of like learning computer science is like learning the Chinese characters of Chinese. Yes, you can go out, you can speak Chinese really well. There were a lot of people who were like second generation Chinese who had grown up speaking Chinese with their family, but didn't know the characters. And the problem is if you don't know the Chinese characters, it significantly hobbles your ability to acquire new vocabulary because all the vocabulary is like smashing 2 different Chinese characters. All the idioms are like 4 Chinese characters smashed together. And if you don't know the Chinese characters and you're just memorizing like the actual like word phonetically, you don't have like a framework, a rubric to like hook all that knowledge onto, and your development is just going to be like, I think somebody who learns Chinese and learns Chinese characters, their development is going to be like this, right? Like it'll be slow at first, but it's going to pick up speed. And somebody else is just going to have like kind of a linear, because everything they're just trying to memorize the underlying phonemes, right? Associated with the given, word. And that might seem like a weird analogy, but I do think that like understanding the fundamentals of computer science makes it so much easier to learn like a new algorithm, because you can like, oh, this is in like linear time or quadratic time or something like that. And you have kind of like mental scaffolding that you can like put things on top of. Otherwise, you're just memorizing facts and you don't have kind of like the framework for how those different things fit together.
Yeah.
Would you say that's an accurate, like, kind of spitball?
Yeah. Like, yeah. And I remember writing when I was working with him, there was like I didn't do any like crazy like graph problems or like linked list. Like there was no real CS stuff that I was doing on my job, but there was like a permissions hierarchy thing that I was building. So it was like a tree. And I needed to traverse that tree. I didn't even know. I knew what a tree was because I could visualize it, but I'd never took any classes on it. But I knew like things can like recurse, right? So I needed to traverse that tree to see if like this person had like permissions that were up here or something. So and the way I did it was like really bad. And he's like, you could just go from the root and go like down, or there was something where I was like doing it really, or the opposite. Anyway, I was doing it really inefficiently, and he's like, yeah, if you knew some CS stuff, you could, this would be better.
So for years, this guy's voice was in the back of your mind, like, oh, I gotta, if I just knew this. Was there ever a point in your life where you just kind of shrugged and said, you know what, life's too short, I'm just never going to get to that? I
mean, I did. I started reading through those books and like structure and interpretation of computer programs and like reading through all this Lisp, and I'm like, oh, this sucks. I hate this so much. And like reading through like books on distributed systems and stuff, and I was like, I don't do this in my job. Like this is just such a waste of time. And then over time, I'm like, yeah, there's no applicability here for my daily work. So what am I studying this for? And I stopped. So, but that lasted about a good year and a half.
But importantly, you've got this time bomb, though, as we discussed.
Yes.
You misread your analytics, and you're running out of money, and you just happen to have benefited from this insight from this very experienced software engineer who worked over you, who was telling you, just learn computer science. So,
it's
okay,
easy.
so you're working through the MIT. Yeah, why not? Yeah. So you're working through like this MIT reading list. Like, how did you create such a structured approach? Because a lot of people would thrash. They just flop from one resource to another. That's certainly what I did when I was learning the code. I mean, was there a lot of jumping from one resource to another? Was there a lot of second guessing what you're learning is actually useful? What was your learning process like?
So back then, yes, I did question if it was useful. Like, so for that, I was like, well, I need a CS education. So MIT OpenCourseWare, I think, was like one of the top Google searches. And so I was like, okay, well, they got a bunch of books. I'm just going to read those books. And yeah, I did get a good bit through it. Like I even bought all the books. But I only got like maybe 4 or 5 books in. I mean, that's a lot of reading too. And, it included calculus and stuff and algebra to kind of get you up to speed with like college math, which I hadn't done in a long time. And but yeah, I was like, yeah, this is not stuff I'm using every day. It's just gonna go go in my eyes and go like that. It's gonna just disappear. So I gave it up. But with this time bomb of like, okay, it's 2016 is here, and and if you want to get like a job doing this stuff, you need to learn this stuff. So I was like, okay. Um, so I found a blog post. You probably read it. It's like Stephen Yegi.
Yeah, Steve Yagi.
Yeah,
Man, that guy.
Get that job
That
at
guy
Google.
does not pull any punches, man. He is somebody who does not care. He's worked at the highest levels of Amazon, the highest levels of Google. Great interview with Software Engineering Daily from him from like a year ago that I listened to, where he talks about like AI and how he thinks it's impacting the field. Yeah, amazing developer that everybody here should read some of his writing, in my humble opinion.
I have to check. Hold on, I gotta check that out. So, but I found his blog post on Software Engineering Daily, and it's called "Get That Job at Google," and it was everything you needed to pass the Google interview. I was like, okay, cool. So I was like, I'm gonna take that list and I put it in like a text file, and then I'm gonna find stuff for each of those topics so I can learn this stuff, right? And I did start with some things that were just like MIT had some online classes at this point, and so I took some of those and it was like intro to computer science and like Python and stuff like that. So I did start off with some like real courses. But then soon I kind of went off into like YouTube University and like found a bunch of YouTube videos. And because I had thought about, when I was thinking about like what can I do, I had thought about doing a master's in computer science, but it was going to take too long and it was going to cost way too much. And I was like, I need to compress this and find a way to get this done faster. Yeah. Because of this time bomb, I was like, okay, I'm going to treat this effort like a startup. And I need to get a job before I run out of money. And like with a startup, you need to get this business off the ground before you run out of money. And so I'm going to treat it like a startup. I'm going to market it like you would market a startup. So I can basically market myself as someone to get hired.
That's a good way of looking at it. Like the startup of you. I think that was a while back.
Yeah, so I'm building a product, which is my education, and then like I'm trying to sell it, right? Sell my brain.
You're trying to sell yourself as an educated candidate who understands computer science and also has a lot of programming experience, but the computer science component, you identified that as the thing you're missing, is the actual kind of conceptual, theoretical knowledge, the math knowledge, things like that.
Yeah. So I took his list. Like I said, I put it in a text file, and then I started filling in the topics with YouTube videos and courses and stuff like that, right? That I would just find, or like articles or whatnot. And my presence on GitHub at the time was pretty much nothing, right? Like it was pretty much an empty repo. And so I was like, well, I need to have a GitHub presence if I'm going to get a job. So I'm just going to stick this list up there. And so I put the list up, and then I just kept adding to it, and I'd find another video and I'd adding to it. Because at this time, like you got to remember, I had the luxury of like not having to work. So, and the business was on, like I had done enough development work, so it was on autopilot. Didn't have to worry about it. Like maybe I'm answering a couple of like customer emails here and there, or like questions or whatnot. Yeah. But most of the time, like I'm studying, and my wife is cool with it because she knows like it's for the future, and this is like a big leap. And so she's like, do what you need to do. So I was like, all right. So I'm not going to squander this time. I'm going to do it as efficiently as I can. And so because I'm not doing this again, like I'm not doing another startup. I'm not going to change careers again. Like this is it. Like this is the big one. And then
the last stand.
This is the last stand, and then I'm
burned the boats on the shore. You're stuck in this strange land that you've landed yourself, computer science land.
So So like I said, kept adding to the list and adding to the list. Um, and then just in going through and like doing these courses, and man, I really hate, like, I don't like going through courses. Um, I recently got into like back into art, like I said, like several years ago, I got back into it, and I've been taking some courses recently. Man, I'm tired of courses because learn it like taking courses is hard. You got homework and you've got like, projects you have to finish and stuff. And like with this MIT courseware, it's like, yeah, you have to like write this program that sorts this stuff, and you have to do this and that. And like, uh, I feel like that's kind of where I kind of lose interest with things is when I have assignments. But assignments are honestly the best thing to do because they give you practice in what you're learning. But it just it felt tedious and slow to me, even though that's like the better way to do it. So I was like, well, I'm going to watch videos and I'm going to learn how to make this stuff. So let's start with Big O notation. Okay, Big O notation. I read through a bunch of stuff, watched a bunch of videos. Think I got this. Okay, let's next. All right, linked lists. And honestly, I was afraid of linked lists. I thought this is going to be really hard, and this is gonna take forever to get through this. It was way easier than I thought because it's like the Legos of computer science is like linked lists.
Yeah, used all over the place in
Yeah.
memory intensive or like where you don't have a lot of memory, like C.
Yeah.
Makes heavy use of them with like pointers and stuff.
So yeah, so I was like, okay, linked lists, and I did a bunch of I'd like, okay, I'm gonna code it up and like, all right, and I'm gonna like write some tests or whatever. Okay, that looks good. And but what I made a mistake in doing was learning the stuff, but not doing assignments, like not really applying it. Um, so I, f- I think I remember like I would do a topic and then I would like do some programming problems, but honestly, I don't remember. Um, but the way I did it is not the best way. So the way I tell people now is if you're trying to learn this stuff from zero, go through the topics. Like, yeah, you still have to go through all the topics and learn those. And there's a lot of stuff that's optional in that coding interview university. There's like a bunch that's
Mm-hmm.
you don't need to learn it for an interview. It's just nice to know
Yeah.
if you're interested. Um, but so there is kind of a line in there that says everything below here is optional. Um, so but going through like the main topics, my suggestion is learn how to code them, like learn what they are, learn how to implement them, like in code. Know how to write a test that tests your code, so you know that you didn't make any mistakes. And then use LeetCode or Cracking the Coding Interview or one of these books that, or one of these like websites that gives you coding problems, and solve, I don't know, 3 to 5 problems using what you learned, right? And you're going to be terrible at it in the beginning, and you're going to be like, I don't know how to solve this problem, even though I know it's a linked list problem. Like, how do you, reverse a linked list, or how do you like eject a node? Given the node, how can you get rid of it in like an efficient manner? And like, but like, I didn't know how to like. I had the problem, I had the knowledge, and I had the problems, but it was so hard to solve these problems. But you try to get through it, you like see what the solution is. Okay, that's where I was wrong. Like my solution was terrible, and like here's the better way.
Yeah.
But I would say do a few problems and then move to the next topic. And then learn the next topic, do the same thing. Learn how it works, learn how to write code to implement it, write tests, and then start solving problems with it. And then do a few of those and then move on to the next topic. And then after a few topics, go back to the beginning and solve more problems. And what that does is it lets you review what you learned before. You're still solving problems with it. And so you're learning and then you're applying the knowledge. And then you just keep going in a circle until you're ready to go. But like I read a whole C++ book. That was a dumb thing to do. Like there was so much that was wasted and like books that I didn't need to read through, and like if you read something, that doesn't mean you know it, right?
Yeah.
Like you can read, I read through that whole C++ book, and like a month later, I could probably tell you like a handful of things that I remembered from it. Because
Yeah.
if you don't use it, you lose it. So that's my big advice.
Okay.
Learn it, solve problems with it, move to a new topic, and then come back to it later. And that's when I was changing from Amazon to Zappos, and I had to go through another kind of interview loop to get hired at Zappos, even though it was inside the same company. Usually when you change teams within one of these companies, you still have to interview with the new team. And that's what I did, is I just like reviewed topics, solved problems, reviewed topics, solved problems, and that's just that circle. And I never felt like I was ready. Like I never felt like all right, here goes, like let's do this. I always felt underprepared because it's scary, you know. I still feel underprepared because I haven't looked at that stuff in, 4 years. So, but technical interviews are the way that you get hired. And even though I don't like it, because a lot of stuff in those that you're learning, man, I don't deal with linked lists on a daily basis.
Yeah.
And I don't deal with graph problems. What I deal with is I do use a lot of hash tables, and I use a lot of libraries that other people have made to solve problems and connect to services and all that stuff. So, but if you're depending on the job you get, you might need to know some like really, really basic stuff and solve algorithmic problems on a daily basis. It just turns out that like that's not what I deal with on a daily basis.
So you wrote this excellent article that FreeCodeCamp published, and the article, like tons of people read it because a lot of people at the time were like really trying to get, and I'm sure today, I think Google gets like, I don't know, I think they get like 1,000 applications a day or 10,000 applications. It's a lot. It's a lot of hopefuls that would like to work at Google. Right. And I'm sure Amazon gets a lot of applications as well. All the big tech companies. You at the time, originally it was called Google Interview University. And maybe you can talk just very briefly. I mean, you talk about this in the article that I'm linking to in the show notes. So everybody go read John's article. But what was the process? This was like 9 months or something? Some really long period of time where you're just like intensively doing what you said. You're reading a little bit, then you're going and applying that to try to solve algorithm problems. Like, and of course, you mentioned some leak code and cracking the coding interview. Project Euler is a great place to do this. FreeCodeCamp has like a browser-based version of Project Euler. We have Rosetta code. We have our own algorithm and data structure problems that you can solve using JavaScript, using Python. So you were doing this kind of loop for a while, like learn, apply, come back and review. And so you were doing this. How many months were you doing this before you actually felt ready to apply for Google?
I didn't feel ready. So I had gotten through I learned topics and then moved on and learned a topic and move on. I don't think I was solving problems in the middle. Like I think I waited until the end, till I'd been through all the topics, and then I started solving problems.
Yeah.
No, that was a big mistake. But
so based on, sorry to interrupt you, but like just because I think a lot of people listening to this are probably asking this question, like had you applied what you know now, how long do you think it would have taken you to go through like the entire contents of Coding Interview University? Like, do you think you
full
could have
time,
shaved several months?
Yeah, full time. It could have probably been like just I don't know, like 3 or 4 months. Like, yeah, it didn't need to be so long. Like I said, there were books I was reading that I didn't need to do, and like it was just.
So a lot of people are like listening to this podcast are like, man, this is a long podcast. I spent 2 hours so far listening to this podcast. But what John just said essentially is that you can save 5 or 6 months of your life potentially by doing what he says, not what he did, so to speak, by applying the lessons, the learnings that he had from this arduous journey of preparing and feeling in the dark, and because there wasn't like a path that was blazed for some person in their 40s to transition from, mere web developer, webmaster to like proper software engineer with a computer science kind of like corpus, the knowledge. If you think about London, taxi drivers know like every street in London, right? They have to do that, and they have to pass the test in order to get their taxi medallion thing, right? And in computer science, you have to stand up in front of a bunch of engineers and like answer awkward whiteboard questions and like draw on the board, and or you have to get through some phone screen where you're in like the Google Docs, typing out code in like this horrible environment without any syntax highlighting or anything, trying to like solve whatever problems they just throw at you, right? So yeah, like before there wasn't something like this. You brought that into being, and you're potentially saving all these good folks who want to transition into the field and who do care about getting the more rigorous computer science jobs. Because I think like there was certainly an era for a long time when if you knew like some PHP, if you knew how to use MySQL, you could go out and you could get a job at like a web design consultancy, or you could maybe, you could do a lot of things, right? And what we've seen is over time, you've needed more and more skills, and it's getting more and more competitive, just like any field, right? Like every field has this kind of Wild West days where it's relatively easy to get in, and you just have people, prospectors kind of stepping up and trying. But software engineering is becoming more professionalized, and certainly at the upper echelons of software engineering, there is an expectation that the difference between, a float and a double, that how to reverse a linked list, that these kinds of things. And it may seem like ritual hazing because, as you just said, John, you don't use a lot of these things day to day. Like that you're just putting people through this kind of arduous rite of passage. Everybody has to walk on coals in order to be able to get these coveted jobs. But the reality, that doesn't change the fact that this is how it works. And you do need to learn these things, right? Yeah. So I just want to emphasize that like, John, you're very, I think you're understating like the sheer value that you've created here, and you're a very modest person, but like you can save yourself. And that is with you going full out and already having a whole lot of development experience and all this stuff. Even you at that point kind of, spent a whole bunch of time that you didn't need to spend. And so again, you've crystallized a lot of those learnings there. And that is an incredibly valuable resource for anybody who does want to get a computer science degree without actually going back to school and getting a degree and getting all the debt and spending like 4 years learning a bunch of general ed and other random stuff that is not related to being able to pass the coding interview. If you just want the shortest path to being able to perform well in these whiteboard coding interviews and impress your probably classically trained computer science degree holding peers at these big companies, this is it. This is the shortest path, probably. Like there are plenty of optimizations to be made, and who knows, maybe somebody listening to this comes and like, I can build an even better one. And like 10 years from now, everybody's looking at that, but hopefully it'll be an open, just your project will continue to grow and improve through open source contributions and stuff like that. I do want to emphasize that like your project is the 5th most starred project on all of GitHub. That is a massive achievement. Microsoft, Facebook, Amazon, like all these companies have these big open source, well-funded projects. And your project is like, I guess, certainly in stars, that metric, people liking essentially a project because they found it useful. Your project is doing incredibly well. Yeah.
I'm very proud of it. And I'm just like, I can't believe it either. It's very exciting to see. And I gotta say, like there's been a lot of contribution over the years, like people suggesting, like adding resources, people putting in translations. Like there's so many translations now for probably close to 20 translations of that people have done, like of the project in different languages. And it's just like, wow, this is really great.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, what I'm going to encourage people to do is to, of course, check out your project and to learn from you. I feel so honored to have you here, like kind of like giving this background origin story. rather than try to rehash all of the details from your journey into it, I encourage people to spend that time going and reading your article, which I've linked to in the show notes, and also just going through and spending some time reading through Coding Interview University. There's so much there. And what is next for John Washam? You're working at Zappos. You've got this great company culture that you've written about at great length.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, Zappos is great. So what's next is just living a normal life. So Zappos is really great, and I see myself, staying there until I retire. It's really super. I love the people I work with. It's just really great, and so yeah, I want to stick it out there as long as they'll have me, and I think they will. I think they like me.
A lot of people have reached out to you over the many years since this project has gone live on GitHub, and maybe they've just had GitHub issues. Maybe you've seen threads on Reddit or tweets and things like that. A lot of people have opinions about how to learn computer science, right? You are simply probably the most out there advocating for learning these concepts. I mean, David Malin, also a former podcast guest on the FreeCodeCamp podcast, Harvard CS50 professor, other people like that are out there trying to teach computer science. What you're doing is you're kind of steering people and curating resources and providing a general philosophy for approaching this giant task. That's how I would describe it naively. Would you agree with that sentiment?
Yeah, I agree. Yeah.
Okay. So what are some of the things people reach out? What are some of the most common questions that people ask, or the common things that people say about your project, and how you encourage people to approach learning computer science and preparing for the coding interview?
Yeah. So a lot of folks will reach out, and they're like, they like the project, and they're glad I made it. And they want to get hired at these big companies. I think one of the big questions I get is can I get a referral to Amazon or whatnot? And honestly, I can't. One, if I haven't worked with you before, and I don't know of you or your skills, or what you can accomplish, I can't vouch for you, and that's really what a referral is. In the beginning, actually right when I got hired at Amazon, I put a few of them in. But I don't think they went anywhere. Amazon's a big place. And also if you're, I'm not up on international laws and visas and stuff like that. But from the folks I've talked with at Amazon who got hired from outside the U.S., most of them came to Amazon while they were working on a master's degree in the United States. So they were in Mississippi, or they were in Colorado, and they were in their master's program for CS, and then that's when they applied. And that makes it much easier for Amazon to hire you because you're already here. If you're in, let's say you're in India. I know there's a presence at Amazon in India. I know because we work with Zappos. We're inside Amazon, of course, and the services that we work on are highly dependent on Amazon teams. And we interact with a lot of folks that are in India. So there is a presence there. So if you can't make that jump to get to the U.S. to for that master's or whatnot, I would suggest trying to get through with your local Amazon office or Google office or whatever company it is. And don't be afraid to get a job at a company that's not one of these. I know it's the slam dunk is to graduate from college and then boom, you're at Amazon, or boom, you're at Google. But man, there's so much competition. It's a tall order to pin your hopes on that. I mean, I didn't do that. My first job was, working at that little mortgage originator company.
Mm-hmm.
So
Yeah, your first
there's,
developer job.
yeah, I mean, like on two hands, you can count the number of like mega tech companies that there are, but there are tens of thousands, or probably hundreds of thousands of like smaller companies that need software engineers. And that's a great place to get experience. And once you have experience, even though the job may be, awful and it may be, not the best conditions, but you're writing software. Once you have that, then it makes it easier to make the jump to somewhere better. And that somewhere better may be Amazon, or it might just be, it might be a bigger company, or it might be a startup. But I know that these big, huge companies are the goal, and you can get there. You just might have to take a little bit longer route. But don't feel like, I'm too old to start at these companies, or like all my friends are working there and I'm not, so I've missed I've missed the train, and now I'm behind where I should be in life. Like, you're never where you should be in life. Like, should to me is kind of a bad word. Like, don't judge yourself against other people. Don't judge just know that, are you doing the best you can do? And if so, then you're on the right track. And don't feel like you have to work at some big company like right out of college to be a success, because success isn't about like winning immediately. Success is about winning over time with small incremental wins. Yeah. And also, when you're reaching out to these big companies, you're not going through one HR department. Like, let's say you send in your resume. Like at Amazon, there are hundreds of teams and there are hundreds of recruiters. There might be thousands of teams. I don't know. It's huge, but there are probably hundreds and hundreds of recruiters, and those recruiters are assigned to individual teams. Maybe a handful of teams would be under like a few recruiters. So when you're applying for these companies, apply for basically when you're looking through all the job postings, look for stuff that you're interested in. Maybe it's like on, I don't know, some AWS team, or maybe it's some, ads team, or like, but I know you're probably going to apply to whatever they have, because it's like you'll just take whatever. And I wouldn't discount that. Like, that works. But, to kind of narrow it down, yeah, find something that you think's interesting and that maybe your experience or your passion or your interests align with, because that's what you're going to do better at, because you're going to care more about it. And then put in your application with like as many of those teams as you can, because it's not going to one huge pool of resumes. It's going to one pool of resumes for one small set of like maybe one or two recruiters.
Yeah. So just to recapitulate, don't think of I'm applying to Google or I'm applying to Amazon. Think I'm applying to AWS's billing team or something like that, right? And that way you can kind of more tailor like who you're likely to interview with, what sort of skills are likely to come up, what the traditional pathway into that team is. What is that through a recruiter? Is there a separate like application process? So just to make sure I understand correctly, like, can I only apply to Amazon one time in like a 6-month period? Will they like penalize me for applying to several different positions or something? Or how does it work from, and I understand some of this may be proprietary. Like we have a team member at freeCodeCamp who also works at Google, for example, and she's not allowed to talk about the recruiting process at all or anything related to it, because it's like the moment she talks about it, then like everybody adapts and like just tries to game their application process. I totally understand, So like, and there are people out there that are probably like high paid consultants that help people try to get into these, and because a job at like a big tech company is a coveted thing, and people are willing to, beg, borrow, or steal their way into that job, right? In some cases, right? So, so I just want to emphasize, like, I'm not trying to squeeze like proprietary information or anything that like. I just want to help people, and I think you want to help people adapt to the way the process actually is and not game it. And you don't get the vibe at all from reading through Coding Interview University. It's like the exact opposite of those kinds of shortcuts. It's like, okay, here's the hard work that you need to do. Do this hard work, but don't necessarily do this hard work. It's basically like what I get from reading through it. So just to get back to my question though, like, can I potentially apply for lots of different positions and lots of different teams, or is that likely to, raise a flag like this person's just spamming out applications to every team we have? How does that work? How would you advise people on that?
Honestly, I don't know. So I'm not a recruiter. I'm not in that, area. But I know that when I applied at Google, right, I applied for one job, and I went through a referral because that guy knew me before I even started studying this stuff, right? And so he saw my journey, and he was like, "Yeah, I'll put in a referral for you," because he's seen like what I can do.
Yeah.
And like I remember talking to him in the beginning, and before I even started, and he's like, "Let me give you an example of a question. Like, what's the difference between an array and a list?" And I was like, I don't know. So, which is pretty basic question. Like you'll get pretty quickly, like once you start studying this stuff. But yeah, I basically knew nothing, and so he saw where I had gone to, and he was like, "Yeah, I'll put in a referral." He did. So he did put in a referral, and but with this one team, and because I didn't know how this stuff worked, and I didn't even get a phone call. Like I didn't even get a phone screen. So Google's tough. I mean, but maybe I was burned because like my thing was like all over the place, and they're like, "Well, we don't want to hire the Google University."
Embolden everybody.
Yeah, it'll look like he hacked he hacked into our process and like, found a way in, and like by doing this like crazy thing. And so we don't want to encourage that.
Yeah, and
so, but I don't know. I never got an answer, but I did reach out to. But what's funny is the ex-HR guy who wrote a book on like Google and its whole like human resources stuff. I DM'd that guy on Twitter. This is back when I used to be on Twitter and used to use it back in the day. But I DM'd him and said, "Hey, like here's my story and like thing, and like I didn't even get like a phone screen. Like what's going on?" And he was like, "That's pretty ridiculous. Let me see if I can get you in touch with some." And he doesn't even work there anymore, but he kind of put in a nice word for me. But like even then, I applied. Then he told me like, "Oh, there's a bunch of teams. Like you got to find the team you're interested in." I was like, "Oh, okay." So, and you got to remember, Google in Seattle at the time was small. It was like one office building in the suburbs of Kirkland. Like it was not in the thriving Seattle metropolitan, metroplex or whatever. It was like one office building with like a cafeteria. And so, yeah, there's probably not that many open jobs there. And so what he said was, find some teams that you're interested in working with, but these were all like just Seattle teams, and there weren't that many. But I did put through with those. I still didn't get like a phone screen or anything. But
so even with that additional boost from somebody who was essentially a former insider, you still couldn't penetrate the veil of whatever goes on, whatever black magic is happening behind the scenes.
Yeah,
where they use to determine whom to bring on to the team.
Yeah. So how did I get in? So after that failure, I was like, well, this sucks. And then I ended up changing the name from Google Interview University to Coding Interview University, because I was like, well, if I didn't get hired at Google, that's a bad look. And and it's not just Google out there. Like there's a bunch of companies. Like I should just change the name. So I did change the name.
Yeah.
But after that, I was like, oh, there's a bunch of teams, and I need to like connect with the team I want to work with. Okay, so then I looked over at like a bunch of Microsoft postings and put in stuff there. And then with Amazon, I found a guy on LinkedIn that I knew, that I was connected with, who worked at Amazon. And we had met at a startup event the year before, like 3 years before, I think. And I didn't even remember who he was or like what we had talked about, but he knew that I had like started talk to the manager, like that business and everything. And he was like, "Yeah, I'll put in a referral for you." And he like knew that I had like done this whole coding thing and like taught myself CS. He's like, "Yeah, I'll put in a referral." And then he was the hiring manager. Well, not he wasn't the hiring manager, but he was a manager on the team. I was actually worked for a different manager who was the hiring manager. But that's how I got in, was a referral, but he was very close. But I also still had to go through the phone screen and the interview. But I don't remember if I applied to a bunch of stuff at Amazon or not, or if it was that just the one. So
Yeah.
yeah.
Well,
But
you got in, and that's
I got
a big
in.
deal. Like, how old were you
Yeah.
when you got your job there? Do you remember?
It was 7 years ago. So what is that? I was 45.
You were 45 when you got your first big tech job. I'm definitely like, a lot of people ask me like, how do I get into tech? Like I've been doing
I'm 30.
like
I'm
just
too old to get in
Yeah.
now.
I know. I started learning to code when I was 30. So I was just an English teacher before that and the school director. So yeah, like I think it's really inspiring, and you've laid out this very clear path. I mean, in terms of how to actually hack the actual interview process, you don't really have any advice for that. So much as just like that tip. I mean, at the end of the day, there's no substitute for hard work. This is not a fake it till you make it type thing. You need to actually know what you're doing.
Yeah.
Right. I mean,
Yeah.
for some reason, I think
You
I
can't
feel
fake
like,
a coding interview.
Yeah.
Like, yeah. Good luck with that.
I feel like people are like somewhat entitled to getting like a really good job. I talk with computer science grads all the time who are, fraternity types and like didn't take school that seriously, like did the minimum to get through, and they're like, I can't get a job at big tech. What the heck? Like I'm a failure. I'm like, no, you just need to like, just because school's over doesn't mean you don't need to go tighten up your fundamentals and actually be able to pass these interviews. And so it's a hurdle for everybody. It's certainly a hurdle even here in the US where we're a little bit more progressive in terms of not like requiring everybody to have a degree in their field of study or even necessarily requiring people to have a degree. Although importantly, you do have, did you finish your university degree?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah. So, and you were able to go into the Army as an officer, which is one thing.
No, I went in as it was what is it? It's been so long. It was basically like the rank 4.
Rank 4, okay.
I was a specialist. Yeah.
Okay, because I've heard that you have to have a degree to be an officer. Is that true? So,
I think so, yeah. But I just like after that did that like board interview thing and failed that. I didn't try to go the officer route.
Okay.
Yeah.
But sorry for like going back to those details, but like you do have a degree, even though it's not in computer science, and then you have all the supplemental learning, and you have preponderance of proof of that supplemental learning in the form of this top 5 GitHub repo that like has like tons of people using it and following in your footsteps. So, I guess my takeaway from this conversation, other than the specifics of like your learning journey and like all the entrepreneurial advice you shared that I think is very actionable for people who do want to write software and like be their own boss, so to speak. And I mean, that's a good reason to go into entrepreneurship is because you don't want to have somebody standing over it. It sounds like you enjoyed that, but you were very happy to subvert your own, I guess, like full authority over what you're working on when you're a startup. Literally nobody's telling you what to do except for maybe investors or a board of directors and like a charity standpoint. Like I ultimately have to answer to FreeCodeCamp's charities board of directors. But now you like kind of like went back and you're working under probably a manager who probably also has a manager who probably also has a manager. So you're part of a hierarchy again. What was that like, that adjustment to going back to work life after being, I guess you were only like, because of your miscalculations and stuff, you were only like truly free from work and running your business for, a year or two. But like, what was that like going back in? Did it feel like Billy Madison going back to like, grade school and like suddenly have to sit at the desk and like listen to the teacher and when you'd already previously been able to just do whatever you wanted?
I mean, I had worked at so many small companies that it felt different because this was so big. And yeah, and you're like several levels away from the CEO. You're just part of a huge organization. Like Amazon has so many teams. Like at Zappos, we have to interact with these teams quite a bit to like, get features accomplished and stuff. And like, we'll reach out to one team and we're like, okay, this is the team that gives us like delivery options. And it's like, oh, but it's not the team that gives you the delivery dates for the delivery options. It's a different team. And then like there's like so many specializations and so many teams that it's just amazing. But yeah, like it it felt good to be inside something so large and safe. And it felt good that I had people that were helping me and like saying like, yeah, this code not so good. This could be better, and like you could write this test a different way. And so it felt good to have that kind of that mentorship to kind of help me get up to speed and everything. And my managers were great. Like they were all great, and like so.
Yeah. I mean,
it was nice.
It's interesting. Like the U.S. military, like the Army has 500,000 people in it, right? And Amazon has more than 1 million people if you include like everybody in the giant apparatus. So did it feel like a return to like a large, did it feel anything like being in the Army?
No. I mean, I guess maybe, but like it just felt like a new world. But I welcomed it. I mean, it's nice to be your own boss, but it's also hard because everything's on you. Like the success of the thing is on you. And you're constantly trying to make decisions. Like you have opportunities and you have to make decisions, and like it's almost like you're trying to almost like you're trying to do a speed run of like Mario Brothers or something, where you can't make if you make any mistakes, you fail, right?
Yeah, and you have to reset.
Yeah, but reset is like starting a new business, right? Then you start all over again. So with businesses, it's like, well, I got to make all the right decisions and like pass on the opportunities that don't feel right or whatever, or like.
And it's years of your life, essentially, like building this thing that can be very fragile.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So would I like to be my own boss? Like, yeah, but I'll just wait till retirement and then I can be my own boss. And
you think you're going to do anything entrepreneurial in your retirement?
No. I'm just going to not have a boss.
just gonna enjoy your hobbies and enjoy life.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I mean, speaking of enjoying life, I saw on your blog. Did you go to like Disneyland, the Star Wars? Did you make it out to that thing? I can't remember what it's called, but like Disneyland has like a big Star Wars experience now.
Yeah, it's great. Yeah, so we went to Disneyland, and yeah, they have that kind of like that Star Wars world. I forget what it's called, but they also have that at Disney World as well. So you can go either place, which is geographically convenient to you. But yeah, that place is really cool. The ride.
Sorry, your audio just cut out.
Oh, I was clicking and I clicked the wrong thing. Stop touching stuff. But yeah, the Rise of the Resistance ride is, man, that's a blast. Like it feels like you're in Star Wars. It's so cool. Yeah, that's great. But then like on my blog, that Star Wars thing, yeah, that was at Zappos. Like they had people dressed up in like Chewbacca and like all sorts of stuff. It was really, Zappos is a cool place. Look, we got petting zoos sometimes. Like there was a llama, chickens, bunnies, goats.
My kids love alpacas and llamas and ostriches. We've been out to like an ostrich farm in California and stuff like that. Petting zoos are the best. Awesome, man. Well, again, this is like maybe the longest podcast I've recorded. This is a long one, but we've covered so much ground. Is there anything else, like any other questions, anything that we can tease out of you while we have you in terms of like things, misconceptions, things people think about the job application process, planning, like hunkering down to learn computer science, any other wisdom we can get?
Yeah, I'm going to hit a few things. So
Okay.
one, I think you had mentioned 10,000 hours at some point. 10,000 hours gets thrown around a lot, and
There's no scientific basis to that. That's just like a
great,
convenient like
great.
meme thing, essentially.
Way to go, writer. I forgot your name.
Malcolm Gladwell, I think.
Yeah. So, and the thing, even if it did take 10,000 hours, the thing that people have to remember is that 10,000 hours is for mastery. It's not for actually getting the job. So whether you're going to be a software engineer or like a concept artist at some game company or like whatever it is, like the skills you need, you don't need 10,000 hours to get there. Like maybe 10,000 if you're going to be like a person who's been at that job for 15 years, but if you're just getting hired, you're nowhere close to that. So you can throw that number right out the window. And like, let's talk real quick about AI because
Yes.
yeah,
I can't believe this is the first time we've talked about AI in this. Yes, the thing that everybody talks about, asks about.
Yeah, so I had a guy. So sometimes people inside Amazon will reach out to me as well, like through our little internal messaging thing, and because they want to change jobs and become like a software engineer or something. And one of them asked me, he's like, with AI, should I even try to learn this stuff? Like, what's the point? And what I think AI is turning into is it going to take our jobs? I don't really think so, because here's the thing with software. Software is so specific. If you're like, hey, give me a web page that shows like a button on it, sure, you can make a web page with a button on it with AI. Like, but if you need to make business decisions and get a product manager to answer your questions and say like, when we do this registration form, like how long should we like have password verification, like validation on here? Should we like, what length should these be? Like, should we do email validation? Like, okay. And then all these questions that come around each of these, like any new feature has like this kind of branching of all these possible like product decisions you could make around it. And then somebody's got to answer all those. So basically, if they took away the engineers and said, we're going to let a product manager use AI to build this thing now, then, or let's get rid of all the product managers and just have the CEO like talking to AI and making the whole website, it's going to take the person just as long to specify every possible decision that needs to be made in the generation of this code and the generation of these features. They're going to have to specify every little thing. And if you're going to do that, you might as well just be a programmer, because that's what we do. So yeah, it's like, yeah, they can make some cool stuff, but like there's always going to be a need for programmers. Like,
yeah. And what I like to tell people is like, in my opinion, programmers are just communicating what needs to be done to the machine, right? Mm-hmm. They are also probably making a whole lot of decisions along with the PMs, along with the quality assurance, security, all the other people that are, thinking about this feature or this giant code base or whatever. Like, those are all decisions, and code is just a very crisp way of encapsulating exactly what to do in each situation and communicating all those details to the machine, right? It's like taking a spec and converting it into code. That spec, the code cannot be more precise than the spec that, like, I guess generated it. I guess maybe that's not the right way of thinking of it, but like an AI is not going to make those decisions because I guess the best you could help for would be an AI that's steeped in all the best practices and has read clean code and like all these different books, which I'm sure GPT-4 has, but like actually understands and appreciates and can make those kind of like trade-offs and yeah, I mean, it would have to have such a broad understanding of every facet of, the business and the domain and all these different things in order to make those decisions that a human programmer. The biggest problem, I think, is that a lot of people have misconceptions about what programmers do, and they think I just turn coffee into code, and that like, you know, being able to take a picture of like a wireframe and have that converted into a website is web development is solved, you know? And I don't believe that at all. I believe that, I mean, it could be many decades before we have AI that can function on the level of like, you know, a software engineer who has a few years of experience. So yeah, I mean, I'm hopeful that it'll make productive developers like yourself even more productive. But at the same time, my theory is that people just use it as an excuse so they don't have to do the extremely hard work of learning math, programming, computer science, so that they can become software engineers, because it's so much easier to just, you know, sit on the couch and you know, say like, it doesn't matter, it's all going to be automated anyway. Mm-hmm. Right? When in the reality, who was that? I was talking with Ken G, Ken's Nearest Neighbors podcast, data science podcast. And he said, like, basically every time some new tool comes out, like, people use that as an excuse not to, you know, focus on building up their fundamentals and everything like that. And every single tool, every time has been wrong. People have been making tons of money as developers, getting things done throughout, you know, Microsoft front page. The sky's falling, web development's over, you know. No code, the sky's falling, everything's over, you know. Mm-hmm. But, you know, I talk to lots of devs who make heavy use of no code, and they already understand the fundamentals, and all they're doing is kind of like QAing the machines and making sure the machine has good output, kind of like a high-level scripting language, right? So you could, like Joel Spolsky, Joel on Software, he said that he does believe that LLMs are a huge improvement, and that he thinks they're like the next big thing for programmers after like garbage collection, right? In terms of just simplifying the developer experience. Yeah. But even he, conceding that he thinks these are this massive tool, just kind of laughed when I asked him whether it was going to actually dramatically impact the employer workspace. So the reason I share all that is just because I agree with you, and you're definitely not alone. In fact, I have yet to have any guest on the show who was just like, oh yeah, it's over. You know, very few people seem to believe that, except for, you know, if you listen to like the people that are trying to sell GPUs, people that are trying to sell, you know, enterprise AI solutions and stuff like that. I'm sure they'll overstate, you know, or maybe underappreciate the amount of decision making that an individual developer makes throughout the day. I mean, how many decisions do you think you make a day?
I mean, every line of code is just more decisions. So
right.
And somebody's got to make those. And so you either let the product person do it, or you count on the, you know, the developer to do the right thing. And do I count on AI to do the right thing? No. You know, like, I mean, yeah, if you look back at, I won't write on this topic too long, but yeah, if you look back at like when Squarespace and like Wix and like those are now big, and like at some point you were spending, you know, thousands of dollars to somebody to like make your website and to make your photo album on the website and to make the, you know, turn your brochure into a website, and now they have this thing to do it. And are we decrying the loss of those jobs? No, those people went on to do more interesting jobs than just turning brochures into websites.
I mean, you are a walking embodiment of somebody who, to some extent, some of your earliest work is probably just a series of tools that people would use. And what did you do? You just went and upskilled.
Yeah. One other thing I want to mention real quick is the difference between like front-end engineering and like software engineering. And front-end engineering, you call it web development, like whatnot. It's got a few different names. At Amazon, it's called a front-end engineer, which wasn't something the title that existed when I started. That's kind of it came in after. We used to have web development engineers. But if you're looking to get into like front-end development and like React and Node and all that stuff, like honestly, I can't help you because that is just not my world. So if you're looking to get into that, like I would hit developer roadmap, that project, to learn what you need to learn to get there. At one point on Coding Interview University, I think I made mention of like, if you're doing front end, you don't need all the CS stuff. And some guy at Amazon reached out to me like through the internal chat, and he's like, hey, if you look at the requirements at Amazon, like you have to have CS knowledge to like do, like you need to know your data structures and algorithms to do front engineering. I'm like, okay, I all right, sure, I believe you, but like I said, that's not my world, so I just don't know. So look into the jobs that you want, look at the requirements that they're asking for, and make sure you match that, whatever your curriculum you have to be what they want to hire. So
yeah, it's interesting you say it's not my world, but like for a long time, I mean, obviously you were doing full stack LAMP development back in the day, but you did spend a great deal of your time doing HTML, CSS development.
Yeah, but we're in a post LAMP world, bro. We're in a MERN. I think MERN's. I don't know.
MERN stack, MongoDB, Express.js, Node.js, and React.
Yeah. Are we still using Express.js? I don't even know. Like, would it be MARN now or MERN, double R, ERN? I have no idea. So
yeah,
it's not my world.
Yeah,
so,
but I just say JavaScript stack, if you will, because most of it's full stack JavaScript. But yeah, man, it's been so great learning from you. I cannot tell people enough that like investing in your skills, taking the time to actually learn these things instead of just saying, oh, I probably won't need that. Like if somebody told me like, oh, you probably don't need data structures and algorithms for doing front end engineering, like I would probably say like, well, does it hurt to have that ability? I mean, by learning a little bit more of this, you're building fundamentals that you can later build upon. You're creating a scaffold that you can hang things on later on. There is no knowledge that is not power, right? This is from the Mortal Kombat 3 title screen. And I genuinely believe that. I am so grateful that I did spend time like actually, learning fundamental CS. Granted, my knowledge is not nearly as broad as yours, but I'm grateful that I did it. And I'm grateful that I spent a lot of time coding algorithms and data structures and solving a bunch of Project Euler problems and things like that. And it's given me appreciation, if nothing else. Like, I mean, in the grand scheme of things, what is 3 or 4 months of your life that you're just, after work, after school, just sitting down and learning a little bit of supplemental CS, right? What harm comes from going through CS50, right? And building the project, not just watching the big YouTube video on freeCodeCamp's channel, but actually going through and doing a lot of the projects, right? And another big thing I want to pull out is like your, spaced repetition, which you didn't really call it spaced repetition earlier, but just like going back and reviewing things regularly. And each time you review it, it becomes a little bit easier to remember it. The wrinkles in your brain are etched a little bit deeper.
The myelin sheath increases on your neurons. Yes.
Yes. So the electricity can travel a little bit more efficiently through there. And yeah, we're going to have a neurology lecture now. All right.
That was from I think the talent code, which is
the talent code.
Yeah. Which is like a big, it's a book among artists. So like I said, I've been big into drawing, but
the talent code. I haven't actually heard of that book.
Yeah. The more you, like you're not born with talent, like the more you do, like you're born with an interest, the more you do things, the more that myelin builds up on your neurons, and you get more efficient at making this. Like it all just becomes second nature.
Yeah, so. And I would say talent and practice and interest, they all fuse together. Like the better you get at something, the more you're going to enjoy doing that, and the more you're going to do it. It's like just a virtuous circle. And so, like with programming, like with learning languages, which is something you and I have spent a lot of our time doing, like with maintaining open source projects, anything. The more success you have, the more early wins you have, the more momentum you're going to build up. And so
there's
John,
there's always like the, will I ever be as good as like Linus Torvalds or so and so? Like it's like you don't have to be like you're like if you're a musician and you're 6 years old and you're not as good as Mozart, so should you just quit? No. It's because there are people in every sphere of music, art, linguistics, software engineering. Like there are outliers in every field, and you should not attempt to like be that. Because those people are like one in a million, right? Like don't try to be the outlier. Just try to be, because most of us are not, right? Like if the outliers were the only ones that got hired, then there would only be like 12 employees in the whole software industry. So like there's them, and then there's everybody else. There's the rest of us, like all the normal people like me, and that just have to learn it. That's it.
Yeah, 100%. John, it's been such a pleasure having you on the Free Code Camp podcast. I hope everybody enjoys checking out the links in the show notes, and I hope everybody enjoys learning from your teaching and that you save them a tremendous amount of time in their journey. Do as John says, not as John did. Learn from the time that he spent unnecessarily thrashing about and learning what the path forward was. And I greatly appreciate not only you sharing your wisdom as you blog, but also just creating this amazing resource for people and making it open source, making it free, making it Creative Commons. I reached out to you a while back and said, hey, can we add a Creative Commons license on this? Because FreeCodeCamp would love to incorporate some of this into our learning platform as well. So we're hoping to do that, and especially with like flashcards and stuff like that in the future. So just thank you again for being like a chill human being in the open source world. And you didn't have to do any of this publicly. You could have just done it all privately and gone and had, a good career, and kind of just, it's a lot of work to actually share knowledge, right? Most people don't do that. How many software engineers are there in the world? How many people are there in the world that got their first big tech job at age 45? And how few learning resources are there? Thanks for being one of the people to put pen to paper and share your wisdom.
Thank you very much. Like I said, it's been an honor to be here. Like you're one of my heroes in this in the coding world. So yeah, this guy rocks.
Awesome, man. Well, everybody, until next week, happy coding.